Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We'd like to start right now. Now that we have most of our guest speakers, as well as the president and chair of council here at Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, it's only appropriate that we begin this all-important event right now. I'd like to once again welcome all of us to this mid-year economic review and outlook conference as powered by your chamber, the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. I'd like to urge that for camera purposes, please let's occupy the spaces ahead of us. If you sit and you see an open space or open seat, please just move straight. Yes. Some of us are moving. Please let's move. Let's move. I understand that the first two rows are reserved, or the first row, but please let's move at least to, yes, to those other places. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Let's do the moving very fast as we start. Once again, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We'd like to begin this all-important event today. It's our custom here at the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry to begin all of our events with the rendition of our national anthem as a mark of honor for our country. Can I please urge that we be upstanding as we take the first stanza of our national anthem? Please let's do so.
Tribe and tongues may differ, in brother and hood we stand. Nigerians all and proud to serve our sovereign fatherland.
Thank you so much. Please do have your seat. I know some of us still want to proceed to the second stanza and the last stanza. Even yesterday at the burial of our former president in Daura, that some of us were present, physically present and online present. We discovered that at the graveside, the three stanzas were rendered by the Nigerian military. I must confess that Nigerians love Nigeria. That's the truth. Nigerians do love Nigeria. And in our lifetime, this country will be great. I'd like to recognize the presence of our leaders here present this morning. I'd like to recognize that we have with us here now the #1 citizen of the chamber, Mr. Gabriel Idahosa, President and Chair of Council, Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Thank you so much. Thank you, sir. Thank you for showing up today. We also have with us a Vice President here at the chamber, and also chairman of Trade Promotion Board. That is the board that coordinates the all-important Lagos International Trade Fair that the chamber handles every year. Put your hands together for Omoba Abimbola Olashore. Thank you, sir. Thank you. If you know Omoba very well, you know his own unique nature or type of Emilio Concap is always very distinct. Thank you so much, Omoba, for showing up. We have with us also this morning the president of the Chartered Institute of Director here present, Otumba Adetunji Oyebanji. Put your hands together for the president of CIOD. He is also a council member here at SCCI. Jokingly, I told him the other day that we are proud to loan him to CIOD as the president and also a council member here. I'm also happy also to now attach Otumba to his name. Thank you so much, Otumba. We also have with us my direct boss, the DG of the chamber. She has asked me not to always say this, but I'm happy to say it. A woman that walks fearlessly where most men fear to tread. Put your hands together for my DG, Dr. Chinyere Peace Abnona, FCA. Thank you, man. Thank you so much. We have also with us a member of the Trade Promotion Board, my friend and brother, Engineer Bashir. Engineer Bashir, sir, thank you so much for showing up. I know, always supporting the chair of the board. We have also with us, all our guest speakers are almost all of them here present. Permit me to recognize our brother and a member of the council here at SCCI, Dr. Biodun Adedipe, founder and chair of Consultant Bay Consult. Thank you, sir. Mr. Taiwo Yodele, I listened to his interview, I think after his birthday or just about his birthday, that when he did his 50, sometime 2 weeks ago, and he said he has now moved out from his house that he had sweat, that he had in the house that he built, to somewhere now that is coded because they were after him. Mr. Taiwo, let's put hands together for Mr. Taiwo, chair of the Presidential Committee, Physical Policy and Tax Reforms. This is a man that has turned the fortune of Nigeria for the best. Mr. Taiwo, I want to assure you, nothing will happen to you. We belong to the same generation. Nothing. Some of us are here, you are here. Nothing will happen to you. Your good work that you are doing for this country, we speak together with the prayer of your wife, as you said, for you very well. Thank you so much, sir. Dr. Tokwe Fasua is not here. He will be talking to us via an online when his time comes, but we'd like to recognize him. He's a special advisor to the president on economic affairs, Dr. Tokwe Fasua. We have with us also Dr. Adetilewa Adebajo, CEO, the CFG Advisory. See him? All right, he's one of our guests today. Let's put hands together for him in absentia. He will join us. We have with us also as a guest speaker today, Mr. Tola Adeyemi, Senior Partner, KPMG Nigeria, and CEO, KPMG West Africa. Let's put them together for him if he's in. All right. Ms. Oreoluwa Odetunde, Ed Research, Anchor Asset Management is in. She's not in yet. Okay. Last but not the least, we have Mr. Olale Adebiyi, Regional Managing Director, Partner, Anderson Nigeria. Let's put them together for him. Thank you. Okay, I'm told that Shinwendu, what is it? I can't get the second name. Shinwendu is a partner oil and gas power. He will be representing Olale Adebiyi, a speaker here. Let's put them together. Let's recognize Mr. Shinwendu. Thank you. All right, we move very fast. I'm told Mr. Taiwo Yodele, I don't know what, I'm tempted to always refer to him as doctor. Maybe something is in works. All right, all right. I know he has other engagement in about an hour or so. We'll allow him, just before we do, let's make welcome the president of the chamber and chair of council, Mr. Gabriel Idahosa, FCA, for his opening remarks. Put your hands together for the president.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. May we rise to observe a 1-minute silence in honor of our departed former president, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, the Federal Republic of Nigeria, President Mohammed Buhari, GCFR. May his soul rest in peace. The members of council that have been recognized, President of CIOD, leaders in industry, our distinguished speakers that have been recognized. I welcome you to the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industries Mid-Year 2025 Economic Outlook Review. It's an honor to stand before you on behalf of LCCI. This annual mid-year review is a significant platform for engaging critical thoughts and actions around Nigeria's economic journey. It allows us to reflect on developments in the first half of the year, scrutinize macroeconomic policies and business trends, and outline practical recommendations for a more resilient and inclusive economy. As the foremost voice of the private sector in Nigeria, the LCCI is committed to driving discourse that promotes enterprise, policy consistency, competitiveness, and sustainable development. As we review the first half of this year, we must appreciate both the progress made and the structural issues that continue to hinder inclusive growth. In the first 2 quarters of this year, Nigeria's economy recorded a modest GDP growth, mainly driven by services, telecommunications, and some recovery in oil production. However, inflationary pressures have remained elevated, mainly due to high food prices, energy costs, currency depreciation, and disruptions in logistics and supply chains. Headline inflation continues to hover around uncomfortable double-digit levels, eroding purchasing power and increasing business costs. Although the Central Bank of Nigeria has responded with tighter monetary policy and interest rate hikes, inflation remains stubborn and poses a significant challenge to private sector investments and household consumption. Meanwhile, despite reforms aimed at unification and increased transparency, the foreign exchange market still suffers from illiquidity, speculative tendencies, and a lack of investor confidence. These macroeconomic imbalances need to be addressed with greater urgency and coordination across fiscal and monetary institutions. The private sector, particularly small and medium enterprises, continue to navigate a very challenging operating environment marked by high energy costs, regulatory uncertainty, limited credit access, and infrastructure deficiencies. Businesses across sectors, including manufacturing, agro-processing, trade, and logistics, face significant obstacles in their quest for profitability and scale. Power remains very erratic in most parts of the country. Fuel prices remain volatile in some parts of the country, and security challenges persist, especially for agribusinesses and transport operators. A significant development in 2025 has been the passage and the implementation of the new tax acts aimed at improving non-oil revenue. And there's no prize for guessing who made all that happen. And he's here with us. Thank you, Mr. Taiwo Oyedele. We must recognize areas of resilience and innovation. The technology ecosystem continues to evolve with fintechs, e-commerce, and digital platforms, providing new models for job creation, service delivery, and setting the stage for truly phenomenal growth in the economy. The great creative industries and segments of the agricultural value chain have demonstrated strong adaptability and export potential. However, for this resilience to translate into sustained growth, there must be a deliberate strategy to de-risk the environment and create incentives for long-term investments. As stakeholders in economic development, LCCI calls for deeper collaboration between the public and private sectors. There's a strong need to strengthen investor confidence. And when we say investor confidence, the domestic investor confidence is in fact more important than the foreign investor confidence, because that's where the real growth comes from, not from the foreign direct investment that unduly highlighted. Regulatory agencies must avoid abrupt decisions that increase the cost and complexity of doing business and calibrating the risk in the economy. The government must also prioritize infrastructure financing, ease of tax compliance, now that the tax laws have been made very clear, digitization of public services, and institutional reforms that enhance transparency and reduce the cost of governance. As a chamber, we remain available to support the policy development process with data, feedback, and engagement. Despite the challenges confronting us, Nigeria remains a land of vast economic promise, perhaps translating beyond promise to reality in some sectors, like technology and the creative industry. Our youthful population, abundant natural resources, entrepreneurial energy, and strategic location make us uniquely positioned to become a regional powerhouse in innovation, manufacturing, and agribusiness. The digital economy continues to offer exponential possibilities, especially in areas like health tech, education, logistics, and financial services. The African Continental Free Trade Area, AFCFTA, presents opportunities for regional trade expansion, value chain integration, industrialization, and a very real opportunity for Nigeria to assert its dominance in the African economy in fintech and financial services. Similarly, climate-smart investments and green financing present emerging avenues for sustainable economic growth. However, unlocking these potentials require deliberate and concerted efforts. We must improve broadband infrastructure, invest in vocational training, promote domestic manufacturing, and support innovation hubs. And many of you will know that we proudly commissioned the LCCI BOI Innovation Hub just on the 30th of November. And we invite everyone here to visit the hub as our own contribution to the innovation industry. The local content development, diaspora engagements, and targeted investment promotion strategies are critical. In all this, the government was asked not as a competitor to operators, but as a facilitator and enabler of business success. This is a philosophy that needs to be imbibed by all our government regulators, whether they are federal, state, or even local governments. We cannot afford an environment where operators become competitors with operators in the industry, in the economy. As we enter the second half of 2025, we must approach the remainder of this year with renewed resolve, strategic focus, and collaborative spirit. The transforming our economy is a shared responsibility. Government, business, civil society, and development partners must align their efforts towards common goals. We must move from policy rhetoric to implementation, from isolated efforts in silos to integrated strategies, from short-term fixes to long-term planning. And happily, the tax environment has provided that space for significant capacity for long-term planning around anything that has to do with tax. The LCCI will continue to advocate for reforms that improve competitiveness, protect investments, and create jobs. We must remain committed, and we are committed to building a strong, sustainable, and inclusive economy where businesses thrive and the citizens prosper. I encourage every participant here to engage actively in the upcoming presentations and discussions. Let us challenge ideas, promote solutions, and share insights that will shape a better economic outcome for our country. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Mr. President, for, as usual, very heartwarming remarks as we delve into while we are here today. Clearly, without any doubt, that the Chamber is committed to the business community in Nigeria is not in doubt. And I want to also say that underscores why most of the business, all of us are here today. As we move to what is next, I like to emphasize that we are keeping so well to time, and we will do more as we go forward. To take the first session today is the one and only Mr. Taiwo Oyedele, Chairman, the Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reform. I know you will have enough questions for him. I know if you are permitted, you will not allow him leave here today. So, but there's a session for question and answer that we will take later in the day. So we'll keep to time as we have it for each of them, like 20 minutes or what? Okay, yes, 20 minutes each for the speakers. Then we have enough time to engage them as we have a question and answer session. Permit me to bring to the podium here the one and only Taiwo Oyedele, Chair of the Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reform, as he talks to us about the implementation of the new tax law and the impact on the economy, which where we play. Put hands together for Mr. Taiwo Oyedele.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you to the Chamber for inviting me, and good morning to the President and other very senior executives of the Chamber, and for everyone for being here. Thank you also for keeping to time, and I do not take it for granted. I have only 20 minutes, and I have a lot to tell you. So which means we need to move at the speed of light, and you need to pay attention 150%. What they've asked me to speak to you about is the implementation of the new tax laws and the impact on the economy. I'm trying to figure out where the laptop is so I can point this in the direction. Okay, thank you. Maybe you help me. So quickly, in the time that I have, I will provide overview and context, and then speak to the fiscal and tax reforms. I will highlight some of the key changes, and then I'll close. It's always important to provide this context in terms of why we're doing the reforms, where we used to be, where we are now, and where we like to get to. And the key message there is that we are no longer where we used to be. And that's for good, because we have made progress. While many of the reforms are painful, we need to acknowledge that they are nonetheless necessary reforms, and they are beginning to yield positive results. And you see on that slide, item 1 category are the things I call work in progress, because we're still working at them, we're not there yet. And the ones below are the areas where we're beginning to see the positive turn and moving in the right direction. So clearly you would agree with me that exchange rates recovery, emphasis for me there is on recovery. It should be like sub 1,000. And then stability of the exchange rate so people can plan. I was talking to a gentleman last week who flew in from outside Nigeria and was trying to sell some business here. And I said, why don't you just come and set up here? And the guy said that he does not want to come, or that he operates currently in Hong Kong, and that the exchange rate has been the same thing for more than 20 years. That if he had come to Nigeria, do I know that his investment would have been less than 1/3 of whatever it is that he brought, even if he was making profit every year. And that was a fact I couldn't dispute. So I said to myself, we have to do everything possible so that investors can plan. And I do agree with the president. We should not even over-focus on foreign investment. If you can't provide confidence to local investors, why should anybody take you seriously from outside Nigeria? Inflation is sticky, and it's affecting the cost of doing business, and it's making the cost of goods and services to be high. Poverty is on the increase, and we do not have sufficient decent jobs. According to the Bureau of Statistics, our unemployment rate is low. It's 5-point-something%. We are the same level as the UK. Yet our poverty is more than half of our population. So something is not adding up. And it's even more painful that we're working, but we're poor. When you have working poor, you must provide decent jobs. That's something we cannot disagree on. Interest rate environment is very high. Not many legitimate businesses can be done successfully and even break even if you have to borrow at 35-40%. Government needs to be more efficient, and government needs to communicate better and coordinate their policies effectively. Those are areas that I call work in progress because we're not there yet. But there are those that are turning in the right direction, like our trade surplus and overall balance of payments, slowing global inflation generally, although it went up recently in the US for very understandable reasons. Everybody knew that was going to happen apart from Mr. Trump. And we're seeing interest rate cuts. And what that does for us is if the rest of the world is cutting interest rates, then we become more attractive for capital. And then also, hopefully, we begin to consider reducing our rates. Especially in my own view, when you look at the monetary policy rate as 27.5%, and the market interest rate is sub 20. Even government itself issued bond last week and it was at 17. You look at treasury bills today, the yield is under 20. I say disconnect. The reference rate will not be higher than the market rate. Moderation in the use, in fact, there was a complete stop already in the use of ways and means where we just print money to spend. Our GDP, tax to GDP ratio has improved significantly. We were under 10% just about 2 years ago. By the end of 2024, we are now at 13.5%. As at the end of 2022, the federal government spent 97% of its revenue to service debts. If that does not concern or worry you, you must be from a different planet. We literally borrowed for everything else, including paying salaries. Fast forward just 2 years after, we are below 50% debt service to revenue ratio. This is remarkable. Although I'll be quick to agree with many analysts that these are macro benefits. So at the macro levels, the numbers are moving in the right direction, but it hasn't translated to the price of bread, gari, and yam. That is the micro. But you know the way to look at it? It's like trying to plant a tree, hoping that it will yield fruits. The roots have to go down so that the fruits can come up. The roots are going down, and those are the macros. As a policy personnel, you know, my priority always when I discuss within government is how do you accelerate translating those macros into micros so people can feel it in their lives. Local refining that we are producing, it's a big win. We like drama in Nigeria, so we have to dramatize everything. Should we buy in dollar or naira? Should we continue to import or not? Those are the normal things we do, so don't take it too seriously. We are getting to where we need to be now, and that's a lot of progress. We have upgrade by rating agencies. All of those rating agencies spend enormous amount of time with us, questioning, interrogating our analysis. And every time they leave saying that they see something credible that they can take to the bank. You know, I wasn't surprised when Bloomberg said a few days ago that the Naira has decoupled from the exchange rate, from the price of crude oil per barrel. Because before, when the price per barrel goes down, Naira loses value. But that's no longer the case. We've decoupled. And what I say to people is, before you panic about the price of crude oil per barrel being below the benchmark rates, ask yourself, what are you really looking for in selling crude oil? You're looking for two things. One is revenue. The other one is exchange receipt, isn't it? Those are the two things you're looking for. Budget, you can always adjust it. It doesn't matter how you play it out. Even if the price per barrel is as low as $50 per barrel in 2025, Nigeria will be far better off in 2025 than we were in 2024. You know why? In 2024, the amount that accrued to the Federation account from crude oil and whatever it is that the CBN was able to receive was under $1 billion for the whole year. That's already, we already made more than that in Q1 alone in 2025. Even the FRS alone just told me they collected $200 million in taxes from the NNPC. So even at $50 per barrel, Nigeria will make far more in both revenue and exchange receipt in 2025 than in 2024. These are the things we need to project so we don't panic. And that is why it seems as if the Naira has decoupled from the price of crude oil per barrel. Our capital market is not doing badly. It can do better, especially in terms of the size and depth. And we are seeing improvement in Forex. So this is the context I thought is important for me to provide. So how does the fiscal and tax reform comes in? We recognize very quickly in our reforms that the fiscal space was constrained. I already explained a lot of it. And the tax system is unconducive for growth. We're trying to grow, but the tax system is holding us down. It's an impediment, it's a roadblock, it's a headache. And it's us that created it, so we can also fix it. So we took that decision that we must fix the fiscal system. The fiscal environment, you see some of the indicators that I can't go through because of time. And then you see tax policy that is promoting inequity, unfair tax burden on taxpayers, especially small businesses. We have distortionary tax incentives. If you're closer to the powers that be, you get the waivers. If you're just a honest person who knows no one, you struggle. And there was enormous amount of tax evasion by people who should be paying the most. And the country was being carried by the lowest income earners. If that does not concern you, nothing else will worry you in life. Because once you do that, in a country where already there's a lot of inequality, it just makes it even worse. And the more you increase inequality, the more you sit on gunpowder that is just a matter of time before it explodes. It's not sustainable. Our tax system is not competitive even locally, let alone regionally or globally. The tax laws are cake with many complexities, ambiguous provisions. Many of them we inherited from our colonial masters. Even the colonial masters have forgotten they ever wrote any rules like that. Like Stamp Duties Ordinance 1901. Who carries 1901 in 2025? Innovation is rudimentary at best. Even when we adopt technology, the processes are as complex or more complex than it should be for digitalized systems. We need to reduce the cost of compliance as well as the cost of administration so we can keep the little money we collect from taxes for the benefit of the people, not to collect taxes alone. You can't spend all the money just to collect the tax. We can as well just stop collecting taxes. Then, how are we reforming? So we're reforming by taking a very broad and holistic view at the system. Said it's no longer the time for pash work, like we normally say in Nigeria. So we set out with very clear objectives. One is to be people-centric. After all, the reason why we collect taxes is because of the people. It's at the heart of the social contract. We don't just collect taxes for the sake of collecting them. You collect taxes so you can improve the lives, livelihood, and well-being of the people. So people must be the front and center of your reforms. That was exactly what we did. And you see that all over the tax laws that have just been recently passed. It's growth focus, because when we grow, everything grows, including revenues. And we want to be efficient. So it's people-centric, growth focus, and efficiency-driven. You see that there's no generating more revenue in the headline, right? It's intentional. Because if you set out to do reforms to generate more revenues from taxes, you're placing the cart before the horse. Because taxes are the consequences of economic activities. If there are no economic activities, there shall be no taxes. It doesn't matter how hard you try and enforce the law. If I'm unemployed, you can't collect income tax from me. If you like, put me in jail, I still have no money to give you, right? If I'm poor and I cannot consume, you can't get VAT from me, right? So why don't we focus on stimulating economic activities, allowing businesses to grow so they can employ more people who earn more income and then consume and pay taxes, including income taxes? The tax revenue will come naturally as a consequence of economic activities. So I know many people keep saying that the reform is to generate more revenue. It is not, but we don't mind. We know the revenue will come as a consequence of the reforms. So we have the fiscal framework. Many people have asked me, they said, now that you guys have written new tax laws, you want to collect more money. We are not talking about how it's being spent. So actually, we set out looking at not just tax, we're looking at fiscal reforms, emphasis on revenue, spending, and borrowing, and how all of that work together to move our country forward. It just so turns out that it was the tax laws, tax bills at the time that people knew about, and thanks and known thanks to the controversy. So many people actually thought that we are a tax committee. The tax component of our work, in my estimation, is around 20%. It's a lot more that we're doing. There are things to do with reforming the budgeting system. We have proposals to amend the constitution around issues on fiscal federalism, clarity of taxing rights, application of government revenue. How do you report and account for the monies you've collected from tax and non-tax sources? In fact, our mandate on revenue transformation has 4 sub-components, of which tax is only one. So we have the tax reforms that has been delivered. Now we need to implement. We have government-owned enterprises. How do you maximize value from government-owned enterprises? Our analysis suggests to us that the NMPCL Limited alone should give us between 10 to $15 billion every year from taxes, share of profit, and dividend to the government. That's more than we collect from many taxes combined. And that's just one entity. Of course, the biggest one by no means. And there's also government assets. Do you know that Nigeria does not know the asset it has? We have from real properties either belonging to sports, stadia all over the place, or NIPOs having real property in every local government. The list is endless. We don't even know how many they are. So there is work ongoing now led by MOFI to just create an asset register. Our estimation is that those should be in the region of 100 trillion naira. Imagine assets of 100 trillion naira. If you get 10% return a year, that's 10 trillion. It's more than the money. We can just declare tax-free for everybody. There's no need to pay personal income tax, because that's personal income tax we collect in 5 years. And by the way, if you also realize that some of those assets, government has no business managing them, you know what will happen? You sell it to the private sector, you get the money in immediately, and the private sector will use those assets productively to create economic activities that will now generate more taxes to the government. And there's also natural resources beyond oil and gas. So you can see just revenue alone has 4 sub-components. Tax is only one of it. We have spending, we have borrowing, but I won't go into all the details. So you see them, in this slide where we try to summarize, our focus areas. The KPIs being provide an enabling environment, ensure there's policy coordination, fair taxation, sustainable borrowing, and responsible spending. What are the key changes? Many of them. But if I just highlight the key ones on a broad basis without going into specifics, the laws were enacted on the 26th of June, 2025. We had planned for so long that the day the Mr. President signs, we'll put it online the same day. It didn't work out like that. And I won't go into all the details. We're working on it. As soon as we get the vetted clean copy, it will be online the same day. Because the whole idea is, why hold information from the people if you want them to implement it? I even think we've lost a lot of time already, because every minute from when Mr. President signed was very important and remains very critical. The time we have between now and when we implement the law is not sufficient. If you know the enormity of what we have to do, it's almost like creating a country called Nigeria afresh and writing new laws for them. We repealed all the old laws and wrote new ones. So we need to build capacity from professionals to companies to government officers to everyone. It's almost resetting the whole system. Even the education system have to rewrite their curriculum. We have to train not only the students, but even the teachers themselves. And we have to do all this very quickly, writing a lot of regulations, guidelines, executive orders, explanatory notes, public notices. And we need to do that in time to expose it to get input from the public, finalize on time, give some time before commencement of implementation, which is set to be on the 1st of January 2026. So we have provisions there to harmonize the tax system, not only the number of taxes we pay, but who collects those taxes. We're improving competitiveness for Nigerian businesses. We are embracing globalization, like base erosion and profit shifting. Don't take our profit and go and give to another country to tax it. Okay, so we have those provisions in the law. Digitalization is not just about the digital economy, it's also about how we do business, doing business with government, paying your taxes, filing your returns, and keeping a tab on what you do, which will help you and also help the government, but also help us reduce tax evasion. If you operate in a sector and you're a honest person and you pay your taxes, and your friend doesn't pay their taxes because they don't care, and if anybody shows up, they pay a bribe, a little fraction of what they should have paid, and they wait for the next tax audit. That is distortionary. That's an incentive for bad behavior and therefore a disincentive for good behavior. You can't build a society like that. So for us, when we're trying to fight evasion, it's not really about just generating revenue. It's about creating a level playing field for everyone to operate. You see a lot of transparency provisions in those laws for everybody. Taxpayers must become more transparent. The tax officers must become more transparent, and government must also be more transparent. And there are structural changes because this is not transactional. This is not something you do for the ribbons, for the pictures, for the media. It's something we want to be enduring, not just for our generation, but generation unborn. So there are issues there to support the effort of the monetary authorities around stability of the foreign exchange, around dealing with evasion, progressive taxation. Almost every major tax, from personal income tax to value-added tax to capital gains tax, is now progressive. What it means is, if you're a low-income earner, you don't pay tax. If you're a small business, you don't pay tax. We exempt you. We want you to grow. We want you to breathe. If you are middle income, you pay less tax. If you are very rich, you pay a little bit more, just a little bit more, so we can balance the books. We also have the tax ombudsman to protect the majority of our taxpayers that we left out in the code for so long. If you're a small business owner, you know what I'm talking about. When they show up and say, oh, God, madam, you're only 5 million naira for value-added tax and withholding tax. Maybe it's even the first time you heard withholding tax before. Now, you don't understand what the law says. You can't defend yourself. You have no capacity to hire a lawyer or an accountant to defend you. So you negotiate. And more often than not, they extort those people. And then they come back and they repeat the next year and the year after. Now there's help, and help is on the way. You don't need to speak English. You can just call a call center, speak in your language, and the power of the state is there to protect you so that you can focus on doing the right thing and growing your business. What do we expect from all of this? A lot. Benefit to businesses, small, medium, and large, local and foreign. And then we have benefits for households and individuals, as well as for governments, and of course, by extension, overall, for Nigeria. So these will facilitate economic growth, mobilize revenue, and ensure shared prosperity. So in closing, because I see my brother is coming to remind me, my conclusion and final thoughts. The headline message is, we can build a prosperous Nigeria together. These reforms are so good, but if you don't sell it, nobody will know. People only buy the things you sell. We can still go online and complain about these reforms and nobody will invest. But if you just pay attention to the provisions of the law and see the opportunities that are there for you, you see that it is the time to quickly move ahead. Better days are ahead. We are on track because the worst is behind us. And I can say that to you with all sense of responsibility. We must stay the course. We are not complacent. We're not saying this is the El Dorado. Like the tax reforms are good, but they're only as good as how well you implement. So that's why we're going to be spending the next 6 months every single day of every week, of every month, ensuring that we implement effectively. So you'll be hearing a lot from us in the coming days. You must seek to understand as stakeholders. You need to be well informed and you need to ensure context in whatever you are looking at. Then you must position yourself, get on board, or you miss the train. That is how to connect the dots and get the result that you want. So I'll close with this quote. I must have said this 1,000,001 times because I love it a lot. Is that we are not where we need to be. And we know Nigeria is not the country that we dream of as of today, but we know we can make it that country we can all be proud of. How do we do that? Not just by complaining. We have the right to complain, by the way, but by playing our part, because the best way to predict the future is to create it. Thank you very much, and may God bless you.
Thank you so much, Taiwo. Thank you so much. I must confess that you spent like 80 minutes instead of your 20 minutes. And I did that deliberately because I want you to answer just one or two questions, just one or two. Just one or two, Mr. Taiwo, before I understand you need to leave, but I want to give the opportunity for just one or two questions. Okay, one female, then that's Miss Shade Odunaya, and one male. Otherwise, I'll give the two to female. I like women. I know. All right.
Thank you so much, Mr. Oyedele, and I actually admire your courage in taking up that challenge to work on this project for Nigeria. My question, I have them in two parts. I'm hoping you can answer them very quickly. You said something about responsible spending. It would be good to know how you intend to implement that. And the big question that I have for you is this ombudsman that you have spoken about. A very brilliant idea, because there's so many times we all know that the taxman just kind of holds your hands behind your back, trying to get you to negotiate a bribe. And you can't go to the court system. It's just a mess. It takes forever, it's expensive. So I want to know what you have in mind, or how you intend to assure the integrity of that ombudsman. Who are they going to be reporting to? And who is going to be the one to oversee what they do? Thank you.
Okay, I should give it to two female. Shop and direct.
Thank you, Mr. Oyedele. Super proud of you. You are the hero that our young people are trying to emulate. So keep doing it. Don't be afraid. Everybody's praying for you, and we want to make sure your protection is solid. You can come to any of our houses if they are chasing you. The question is about the implementation area, particularly the local government. Because at the moment, you know, it's the local government that collects all kinds of taxes, and it's the personnel. People call them area boys, but some people call them good boys and girls. But whatever you call them, they're often a menace to businesses in local governments, in the communities. I know in my local government, some businesses are closing down because of the activities of these young boys, mostly boys. So how are you going to empower the local government itself, the structure itself, to understand the process you have developed and implement it in this fair, transparent, and responsible way? And how do you deal with the activities of the people that are making businesses fearful of collection of multiple taxation and all kinds of harassment? People like me are victims, so we're pleading to you to tell us what you are going to do and what we should do to ensure that this, and the abandoned buildings, you were talking of these assets, the abandoned buildings in a lot of areas. What is apart from Mofi just having a list, which is lovely, but what are they going to do subsequently to ensure that those properties become productive assets to the nation? Thank you so much for what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Kuti. One question from the male gender, our gender. Please, straight.
Yeah, good afternoon. It was a nice presentation. Just having introduction of economic development incentives. It is in the place of pioneer status. Just question is whether both the things will concurrently continue. That is the one. Second one is that, is it going to be applicable like pioneer status? One has to apply for getting the economic development incentives. That is the number two. Number three is that whether pioneer status is going to continue for those people who have got as of today. These are the three things. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Taiwo, sir.
Yes. Thank you very much for those excellent questions. So the first one is on responsible spending. How do we implement? Yeah, so it's a difficult one, but we've started the journey. So a lot of what we're doing are not things we can say publicly because you have to be wise. So some of it, we're trying to get them into the Constitution so that they cannot be reversed. We also have some strategies about the timing of presenting those things. For example, after the last election, more than half of the lawmakers lost their seats. At that point, they really can't be bothered about protecting any lawmaker's seats. So if you had a proposal at that time, they're likely to look at it objectively. So we have all those kind of plans. The idea being that we put at the front and center of governance issues around transparency and priority of spending. As recent as just yesterday or 2 days ago, I was still at the National Assembly discussing how to make some of these things happen. And we're also going to meet with Mr. President to share our thoughts. So we have a lot of things we've set as, we are working on. One of it is, for example, the third question on local government. So we know they create the biggest problem for multiple taxes. And it's even more painful that the revenue they collect does not get to the government. In the whole of Nigeria in 2023, all the local government reported under 50 billion naira as taxes collected. The whole country. How is that even possible? That should be like 2 or 3 local governments, right? 774. So we're addressing that, and we're also addressing their governance. They got this autonomy to spend their money. I have not celebrated that judgment because if one person was misspending or mismanaging your funds, and you say, let's give it to like 50 other people, right? You've not addressed the governance issue. As we speak today, you will not find any budgets or audited account of any local government online, not a single one. And if we don't even know what you're doing with your revenue, how do we begin to ask questions on accountability? So we're working with the relevant committee of government, the National Assembly, on how to create a governance system for the local government. We think the starting point is go into the Constitution under the 4th schedule. You see their duties, what they should be doing, from dealing with sanitation to providing, they're supposed to provide home for the homeless. Can you imagine? And they're not even aware they're supposed to do it. And somebody will go and manage to do one 1 kilometer of road substandard and say dividend of democracy. That's not, nobody sent you to do that. What we even want first, let's start with data. If this is my local government, we say this local government has 15,100 kilometers of roads. That is the duty of the local government. Out of this, 14,000 is untarred. So just give data first. We have 60,000 households. 58,000 of them have no access to clean water. That's data. Okay. 44,000 have access to no sanitation. So let's collect the data first. Use that data to develop a development plan. Over the next 5 years, if we find 1 naira, this is how we spend it. Another 1 naira, this is how we spend it. From that, prepare your annual budgets and then audit it and put it online, everything. So that is when you really feel the impact of governance on the people. So the ombudsman, yes, what we plan to do with the ombudsman is, for starters, the ombudsman will be headquartered in the FCT, and it must have an office, at least one, in the 6 geopolitical zones. Over time, it will have a presence in all the states. But while we are working at that, we want to create call centers. So you just call and speak your language. We're trying to even translate the tax laws into Yoruba, Igbo, Hausa, and Pidgin, and also audio, so that even if you can't read and write, you can talk to the tax law and it can talk back at you with a lot of AI incorporated into it. So those works are in progress. The ombuds will report to the National Assembly and to the Nigerian people. So there are requirements for them to publish quarterly online. So you will see and you can hold them to account. So the question on area boys as well, we are having those conversations with the governors as well as with the local government. Is one of the most difficult things to implement. It was one of the reasons, I think I even said it the last time you invited me to LCCI and I got into trouble. When I said these area boys, one of the strategies we are looking at is to incorporate them into the new system where they no longer collect taxes in cash, right? Train them to be civil to some extent so they don't physically hit someone to collect tax from them or take their wares and start running. You know, they remove the side mirrors. Who collects taxes like that? And then pay them some salary so they can keep body and soul together, because if they can't feed, they don't care what tax reforms you've implemented, right? So and then people say, he wants to employ the people that rig election for Tinubu when professionals have not found jobs. So I had to deal with that for weeks. Finally, the economic development incentive is replacing the pioneer status. But if you have pioneer status up until the 31st of December 2025, you'll be allowed to run the course of that pioneer status. Of course, under the law, you are free to say you don't want again if you think that, because you can't get both of that and the incentive under economic development. If you do your analysis and economic development is better, you can discontinue if they allow you. And the rules are clearer. You know, if you are eligible, the threshold, the sunset, but you have to apply and your investment will be validated. Based on your investment, you get a credit that you can use, and this may give you exemption for up to 10 years. So, and it covers all the key sectors of the economy. So those are the questions you have for me. Thank you once again. Thank you.
Once again, please put your hands together for Mr. Taiwo. I think I should make a confession. Each time Mr. Taiwo comes here to make presentation or talk to us like this, I don't want him to always drop the microphone, but I'm constrained to manage the time for all of us. Once again, Mr. Taiwo, thank you so much for that. I have to make the opportunity available with the permission of the DG so that you can clear some things that needs to be cleared. We need to move very fast, but just before we do, while that session was going on, we have some of our leaders joined us. We have a Vice President, Funlayo Okewo, and Chairperson of Best Board joined us. Welcome, man. We also have a Vice President at the Chamber and Chairman of the Public Advocacy Committee, Sir Laddy Smith, FCA, also joined us. We have my brother and I don't know the way to describe him, but I would just say Dr. Ayotunde Koka, a council member here at the Chamber. He also joined us. I think I saw one of our honorary live vice president. I don't know where she is. Yes, I can see her. Ms. Shade Babemtinyong also joined us, our mother and leader here at the Chamber. Thank you, man. So we'll move to yet another brother, a powerful person, also a council member here at the chamber, Dr. Biodun Adedipe. He also has about 20 minutes or so. I trust Dr. Biodun Adedipe. In 15 minutes, he will wow us. Put your hands together for Dr. Adedipe as he takes his session. Thank you, sir.
The president and distinguished council members, and indeed the distinguished ladies and gentlemen present here, I tender my appreciation to the council for having me stand before you this morning, and also speaking after Taiwo's presentation, because it made my life very easy. And why would I say that? A number of the things I would have had to speak to, he has covered them already. So I'll be able to just speak on the high points of my presentation. And then, of course, because the slide deck is also available, everyone present can have access to it later. So I will start from the premise of the outlook for media, and of course, the focus assigned to me by the chamber is on policy options for government and, of course, emerging business opportunities. Now, there are some common problems to developing countries all around the world, which have been reduced to 5 deficits. And I always like to put this forward to remind us of what we need to continually interrogate and see how we improve that. Food deficit is 1, energy deficit, manufacturing deficit, infrastructure deficit, and of course, housing deficits. Now, anytime you have discussion among development economists globally, they will put forward the fact that economies evolve through 3 stages. Stage 1 is when you focus on agricultural products and small-scale manufacturing. Then from there, you move into deeper manufacturing and some bit of high-tech manufacturing. Then the 3rd phase is when you now go into services full scale. And that's my first aberration about our economy. Aberration in the sense that Nigeria started with stage 1, then we skipped to stage 3. In the sense that our economy today is largely driven by services. Services account for well over 50%, in fact, about 54% of our GDP. So in which case, that 2nd stage of development, we skipped it. And that is what also accounts for a lot of the problems we have today in restructuring our economy. And incidentally, the reforms we have had in recent, let me say in the last 2 years, of course, I've spoken to some of these issues in a way, and that is recalibrating the economy in such a way that we create a new narrative for ourselves. And I'm happy to mention this, that I've always queried the data put out on poverty in Nigeria, and for good reasons. Number 1, now when someone tells me 140 million Nigerians live below the poverty line, I ask them, where did you conduct the survey? How did you even define poverty? They say, oh, if you live on $1 per day, you are in absolute poverty. If you live $2 per day, less than $2 per day, you are in relative poverty. Okay, fine. Now, this $1 or $2, how do you even define it? They say, oh, your earnings. And I remind them that no, you got it wrong there. If you measure an African as poor based on what he or she earns, you are completely way off. Because the African culture defines clearly that there are 3 elements that measure what an African consumes. Number 1 is what he or she earns, okay, by rendering a service or putting out a product for sale and making a profit from that. So that is earnings. Number 2, transfer payments. We call it in economics. That is when I give you money as a gift, which means you receive some inflows that you didn't earn by way of giving a product or service in exchange. Thirdly, there's a pattern in African culture that goes this way, that you paid me a visit, and then I give you a very lavish reception. Or simply, my family just prepared breakfast, and then you press the bell of my house, you walked in. So straight away, you are part of the breakfast, all right? You eat food you didn't pay for, and the African won't ask you to please let's do a return visit. Now we know in the cultures of those who define poverty for us, when they invite you to a reception, it's part of the invitation card. Say, bring your wine. That is, bring your own drink. All I provide is the space, and there's always a table behind the entrance door. I mean, something I've lived through, so I'm speaking from experience. So once you enter the premises, there's a table behind the door, you drop your bottle there. But in Africa, it is different. So when you therefore define poverty in context of Africa, using the culture in the advanced economies, then you have missed the way you should actually measure poverty. That's number one. Then there's also a narrative that, in fact, I just submitted an academic paper for that 2 days ago. And that is looking at the informal economy. And we make so much noise that, yes, there's poverty because the informal economy in Nigeria it represents a large portion of our GDP. And I also challenge that narrative that, in fact, when you look at the literature of entrepreneurship globally and running to well over 100 years, what you discover is that what we experience in Nigeria is necessity-based entrepreneurship, not mostly opportunity-based entrepreneurship. And why is that so? Because what we call corporate entrepreneurship is mostly about the formal sector, and that formal sector, I also interrogated the data relating mystery index in Nigeria to the growth of our stock market as a proxy. And I found that in an environment where we have been growing and not creating enough jobs, rather creating dollar millionaires, there's a text to that was issued 11 years ago in 2014. Now, what that has done is now put us in an environment where those who can't find regular jobs with structured enterprises, what we call the formal economy, now have to look for a way of survival. So that today is, in fact, the essence of the resilience that we have seen in the Nigerian economy. So the question then is it about large informal sector being a problem per se, or how we can make that informal sector thrive and thereby create jobs, also give people access to earn decent income, and then how we deepen that over time and create a linkage between the informal sector and the formal sector. So what I then have toward the end of my presentation as recommendations to government took a bit of that and then a few others that Taiwo had mentioned. Now, because of time, I will speak talking about the global environment where we are, but I put them in there in my slides deck, 2 slides there. But let's come to Nigeria. If you can, okay, let me just do that now. Sorry, I should have been rolling this. Oh, maybe I spoke too long on that. That's why the thing is not responding. Okay, thank you. So now, I've spoken to this, and yes, I just made reference to this now. Major global disruptions, they are still very relevant because these issues are still ongoing. Take the Ukrainian war, for example. The US president, Trump 2.0, we call it in our analysis. Trump 1.0 was before, okay, 2020. Now we have Trump 2.0. And the man called Pentagon, if Ukraine, we are not making weapons available. Now get ready, we are giving Ukraine weapons. That was over the weekend. And Pentagon, the military leaders are still racking their brains. So, okay, how do we do this? Now, one thing I want to point out is this, in interpreting how what is happening globally affects us in Nigeria. Now, Taiwo mentioned something earlier, which was reported by Bloomberg last week, that the FX rate in Nigeria has decoupled from the price of crude oil. Okay? Now, when I saw that, I went back and considered what I advocated to the central bank about this time last year. If you look at our data on FX rate movement from 1970 up until 2023, early 2024, there had been that pattern that during the summer, that is July to September, usually Naira weakened. You see that in the data. And then also, secondly, that anytime the price of crude oil dampened, it affected everything. In fact, there was a paper I did in 2004. It's my most referenced academic paper, which was based on the influence of crude oil on economic policy in Nigeria since independence. All right? I presented it at a conference in London in June 2004. Now, the argument then is what we are seeing today being reversed, in the sense that there's now a decoupling of the Naira exchange value from movements in the price of crude oil. So which means something has actually changed, but many of us are not paying attention to it. So of course, if you look also at the stability of the Naira, which began in November 2024, up until date, it's been within a narrow band of 1,548, 1550 to 1,670, the highest we have had over that period of time. Again, you notice that currently the Naira is still appreciating at a time the price of crude oil is going down. So instead of worries within that space, the Naira is actually appreciating. So for anybody who has looked at the history of the Naira exchange value, you want to interpret it as an aberration. But how do we explain that? Now, I put a slide also deliberately. Let me go to that because I want to ensure I keep within the time. Now, when I saw what the chambers wants me to address, I said, okay, you know what? Let me move to an area that many of us are not talking about. That if you look at the first quarter of this year, 2025, our imports was 15.4 trillion naira. Our exports, 20.59 trillion naira. Total trade, 36 trillion. Trade surplus, 5.17 trillion naira. All right? Which, of course, was greater than what we had in comparative period of 2024. The fourth quarter of 2024. Now, non-oil exports, and that's what I want to draw attention to. Non-oil exports was 3.2 trillion naira. Agriculture was more than 50% of that at 1.7 trillion. Now, what were the top export destinations? India, the Netherlands, USA, France, and Spain. Now, what were the strong FX implications? So that I can understand why the Naira has some bit of muscle and is stabilizing, therefore leading us in a direction that can encourage investors to plan. Non-oil exports totaled $1.79 billion US. And that is in one single quarter, all right? These are official non-oil export data. But it's a whole lot more happening that are not captured officially. And I gave an illustration in Kano about this time last week when I spoke on non-oil export at an export forum. And I said, the last time I came to Kano, I was on my way to Zaria. And I traveled by road from Kano to Zaria. And I discovered something. So many trucks loaded with manufacturers were parked on the roadside. A long stretch. So I asked my driver, I said, which trucks are these? What exactly are they carrying? Where are they headed to? And the fellow said, all the content of those trucks are going outside Nigeria. But they are not documented. So when I mentioned that last week in Kano, most of the attendees at that forum said, that is what happens here every day. And it is not captured officially. Of course, some estimates have been made to underscore the fact that probably up to 50% of what is captured officially, the figure we see here, is unofficial non-real export going out of Nigeria. So now, in terms of outlook, and this is the way I'll put it, that we are no more in a VUCA environment. We are now operating in a BANI environment, where the operating environment is brittle, where there is anxiety, where it is non-linear. Non-linear means we saw how it happened last year, but this year it will happen differently. That's what we mean by non-linear. And then incomprehensible, which means that it's difficult to put them together, so you have to keep your eyes peeled, as we normally put it, on an ongoing basis. So within that environment, of course, I put in this slide a lot of things about Nigeria. Population estimated, I checked this out yesterday evening, at 237 million people. And then on my way here this morning, incidentally, I was going through newsletters and mails I received overnight, and then I saw a write-up on manufacturing in Nigeria in the Business Day edition of today. I picked out a few things. And I had mentioned this early last year, 2024, that what I saw is new manufacturing is emerging in Nigeria. So what this column or correspondent of Business Day did today was to now give illustrations of the value of investments by different entities that are known to him. Of course, there's one he didn't mention there that I'm aware. And that one is an Italian company that came here last year to commission a laboratory, okay? The best of its kind in Africa and Middle East. And why would they do that? They said, look, you wear perfumes. Men, you use aftershave. Ladies, all manner of things that we use. He said, you won't see the name of their company on any product, all right? But the material that go as content to produce those things, okay? Soaps, detergents, all of them. That company produces them. And then they found that out of over 40,000 products that they use as inputs, a large number is in Nigeria. So they set up a factory here quietly and did the commissioning. I was the keynote speaker. That was in June last year. Okay? Quietly, no noise. And then, of course, this fellow today now brought forward how much Flour Mills is investing in cassava processing so that Nigeria will no longer need to import cassava starch. How much BUA is investing. This fellow mentioned specifics. How much Dangote is investing, specifics, and several others within the agri space and different other spaces in Nigeria. So what I now did, the second part of what the chamber asked me to do, first and foremost, what are the areas needing policy attention? That is, how do we go from the macroeconomic gains now into microeconomic? And I agree and align with Taiwo, who said earlier on, if you want to eat fruits, you don't expect that the moment you plant the seed is when you will get the fruit. So we have to also learn patience. I think there's a speaker put it this way to me and said, look, if you want to see a matured oak tree, you need to wait for 100 years. So for an oak tree to mature fully, it takes 100 years. All right? So, but of course, in this instance, we are not talking of 100 years from reforms to benefits of reforms. But what are those things we can do that can shorten the distance between the reforms and the macroeconomic benefits now to the impact on the regular Nigerian? I didn't come with a long laundry list. I just picked up 4 items. Incidentally, Taiwo mentioned the first one. I call it disciplined fiscal operations, especially expenditure review and management. Then the second one is to set targets for reduction of informal sector share of GDP over 10-year intervals from 2026 to 2056. That means 26 to 36. What do we want to achieve there? Then between 36 and 46, what level do we want to achieve? And then from 46 to 56, that's a 30-year interval. Now, from my research, I discovered that this was how most East Asian countries approach dealing with poverty, in the sense that they took on about 10 initiatives that would deepen productivity in the informal sector, but help them also grow and become structured and more formal in their operations. So the quality of jobs created, therefore, increased over time. And so you see informal sector vis-a-vis GDP ratio also reducing over time. And I'm talking about a survey of about 130 countries around the world, from which I pulled that out. Then also work on social and business interventions. Cash transfers for me is not the way to go. If we do anything like cash transfers, let that go to registered cooperatives and also to known micro enterprises. And I made that kind of suggestion in sometime in 2020. And I said, looking at what other governments around the world were doing, why wouldn't Nigeria do this kind of thing? If you want to intervene, go into your record of companies that pay taxes. That gives you clear identity. They have a footprint in your tax register. If you want to now provide, let's say, payroll support during crisis, then it is such entities you identify as requiring payroll support, like they did in the UK in 2020. And of course, target eradication of extreme poverty in 12 to 15 years by doing what? Deepening opportunity-based rather than necessity-based entrepreneurship. Then learning, that means focus on education. Education is very key. And then, of course, capacity building for those in businesses. And then, lastly, job creation. Now, in terms of business opportunities, and this is the final part of my presentation, I came up with this statement sometime last year to make people, each time you interrogate a geography, take your mind away from problems, challenges, constraints that people make so much noise about, rather focus on opportunities. In which case, if your mind is trained to see opportunities, you will not surrender to or complain about problems, all right? So I then looked at the Nigerian economic space and asked myself, how do we identify opportunities? I started from non-oil exports. What's the outlook? The outlook for Nigeria non-oil export is very, very optimistic. Every analyst, whether it is Afreximbank, IMF, or whomever, everybody is looking at that space as positive. So now, look at the achievements that I put there. But what is more important is to sensitize us to the fact that in non-oil exports, you can make millions, you can make billions, and more, all right? Now, when it comes to agriculture, to give you an idea of where to look for opportunities in Nigeria, agriculture is about 24% of our GDP, 36% of jobs, and 8.2 trillion naira in trade. And what can you look at there? Different value chains in poultry, fish, cassava, palm oil, snail, etc. Nigeria has the best quality lobsters in the world. Maybe some of you haven't heard that before. Nigeria has the best quality catfish in the world, not in Africa. Catfish, best quality. Now, I'm saying this from the experience of knowledge of companies that export this from Nigeria. And they make their cool billions of naira from export of catfish. All right? And it's not a Nigerian entity, it's foreign. In fact, it has German content. Let me leave it that way. Okay? Real estate, estimated at 16.23 trillion in 2024, and it's still expanding. E-commerce, valued at 9.4 trillion naira, or $5.96 billion this year. And of course, fintech and digital payments. These payments were 387.1 trillion naira. That is payments, transactions processed in 2023. Those are just a few illustrations. Education and e-learning, open space, education estimated at $4.85 billion in 2022, and as exchange rate then at 417 naira to the dollar. Now, what are the opportunities in there? Online tutoring, skills training center, private schools, or daycare center, educational consulting, book publishing and distribution, etc. Fashion and beauty. In fact, the laboratory I mentioned earlier on was cited in Nigeria to take care of Africa and Middle East, and of course, to the rest of Europe, simply in that line. And of course, hospitality and tourism, huge. In fact, if you see the estimate that the Afreximbank generated in their latest report, which was of course released in Abuja about a couple of weeks ago, waste management and recycling, that's the one that's interesting. When I came across that figure, 40 trillion naira, my head was like, how can that be? Interestingly, when I mentioned this at a conversation, and this lady from one of our big banks challenged the data, it now happened that the very same day, I was to moderate a session where the CEO of Unilever spoke. And as if he knew somebody challenged this, then he came up with what Unilever has been doing in that area. And then the estimate talking about ESG and then waste management and recycling in Nigeria. And they gave us an idea of what we have cracked, only about 12%. Quickly, I did my extrapolations. If 12% produce this number, then this 40 trillion is possible. So I said, are we really looking within that space as an opportunity space? And I will close there. And the way it goes is simply this. I know, for example, that about 2 years or so ago, Coca-Cola reached out to some small-scale businesses in recycling in Nigeria and gave them each $10,000 as grant because they are active in that space, and it's just an encouragement to them to do more. Now, prior to that time, I'm aware of this way back 5 years ago, that when we consume the water content and throw away the PET bottle, and we see it as Nigerians as a nuisance, for years, the Chinese made it business. They organized the system. People will collect those PET bottles, and then they sell to the Chinese. Then they will wash and crush, and then export to China. And they were making cool effects. Then they got to a point, they engaged in what we call backwardation. Instead of exporting to China, they now set up factories here to process those things and produce jerseys. And so when you see somebody wear t-shirts here in Lagos or in Nigeria, and you think it's imported, it is not. It is coming out of that PET bottle you carelessly threw away. So one of my friends went into recycling, and that has become his big business today. And it's flourishing. And there are many of them, he told me, within that space. So instead of now just ignoring that space and letting the Chinese occupy the entire value chain, they now came into that and took the lower end of the value chain and then supply to those Chinese. So, and that also told me that there are so many opportunities in this space that we often ignore. But we hear that in another 2 weeks thereabout, we have the rebased GDP of Nigeria, which will in fact expose a lot of sectors where there are opportunities that we have ignored. In fact, we also hear that it will integrate now a lot of activities taking place in the informal sector. So that's why for me, this is the time for us to think, not outside the box. Rather, think what to do with the following boxes. Your strategy, which is about choices. Your people, very important. In fact, when it comes to people now, we talk about agentic AI. That means you have agent AIs that you can engage, that will do what some people do right now. Then you have supervisor agentic AI, which is supervising other agentic AIs. All right? So at different layers. So in which case, what can human beings do? How do we deepen their skills to do what only human beings can do? While then things that agentic AIs can handle will be handled by agentic AIs. They're your systems, your relationships, your risk, and your cash. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I hope the MC will be happy with me about time. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Doc. Once again, put your hands together for Dr. Abiodun Adedikwe. I'm sure if he did not make that statement, if MC will be happy with him, it will be like a statement missing. Thank you so much. I'm happy with you, Doc. You did well within your time allotted. I'd like to announce that we will be having the special advisor to the President on Economic Affairs, Dr. Tope Fasua, online. We are communicating with him. He will be up in about 5 minutes. So I'd like to use the 5 minutes to inform us of a lot of other things that can be of benefit. I know all of us seated in this hall this afternoon are businessmen and women, and the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry is powerfully committed to the growth of your business and promotion of it. One of the things I like to first say is the Lagos International Trade Fair that has been on for the past 38 years, courtesy of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. I thought we were going to put your hands together for the president. For this year, 2025, if you had been following us, you would know that 2024 was a better, bigger one. I want to promise, with the permission of the chairperson here seated, that 2025 will be bolder, bigger, and better. And it's a platform that your business needs to feature powerfully. Your businesses, you need to showcase, exhibit, and for also brand positioning for your businesses. Most of the businesses that are there now began with us at SME stage. Now they are bigger corporations. You have the Eleganza of this world. You have the Dangote of this world. In case you need to know more about the fair, please talk to me thereafter. I can connect you directly. I'm wondering if any of the trade promotion staff is in the hall, but now maybe I think they're having meetings somewhere. If CY is here, he can stand up. Otherwise, please talk to me. I will connect you with the director directly for the trade promotion. You need to talk to them and see how you can maximize your brand visibility at that fair. This year, Hon, I can tell you, is going to be very big and uniquely different from what it has been in the past 38 years. It means for a 38-year-old guy now, or a woman, she will have stopped going to the stage of stopping having children. What that means is that the fair is no longer a baby. That's what I'm saying. So if you have it running for the past 38 years and your brand, your product and services are not present on that platform, I don't know where you should be. Please consider being at the Lagos International Trade Fair 2025. That's one. Two, like I said, we are very committed to what concerns your business or your businesses. Just the last day of last month, the Chamber, in conjunction with the Bank of Industry, commissioned Innovation Hub at our Ikeja office, number 10, Nurudin Olopopo, Alausa. I must confess, because if I say it, you say, after all, he's the PR person for the chamber. If he doesn't say it, what will he say? Beyond marketing that hub, you need to be there. I was there. I was there before the commissioning, and I was there at the commissioning. And I think Nasima president said something about we, the younger ones. You know, I belong to that group, the age of the younger ones. That place is meant for us, is meant for your business. I want to urge that please talk to Doyin. Is Doyin around? Okay, well, you know, I don't want to bother. How can a small boy like me be bothering a vice president? So I like to bother Sheung Doyin Ekundayo if she's in the hall. Can she please stand up so that we can recognize her? Is she there? Okay. Okay, yeah, she's far behind. That is the head. They are not seeing you, madam. They can't see you. They are looking. Yes. You know, I like her height so well. So please talk to her. Just talk to her. How can you maximize that hub? I must confess, you need just go and visit the hub first and see how that place can be beneficial to your system. I was talking to a lawyer. She's looking at me now outside the hall that time, and I must confess, that place, you need to be there. My friend, the lawyer lady that spoke with me. We also have, at the chamber, we are key about planning. And we're planning for our 2026 tabletop calendar. Is a rich platform where your business can actually be your own business can actually be in offices of various organizations. I spoke with my brother Otumba while he was coming in, and he has given me his word. I know my brother and Egbon is also, okay, Tokwe is up now, okay. Is also Egbon Saladi Smith is also thinking in that direction. So that calendar is for you. Please talk to me on how your brand can be there for 2026. I have two other things, but I'll pen it pending Tokwe Faswa's presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, we have with us online the special advisor to the President of Nigeria on economic affairs. You discovered that we need such a person needs to talk to us, Dr. Tokwe Faswa. Can we make welcome Dr. Tokwe Faswa online, please?
Yeah, good afternoon.
Yeah, Doc.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. There was a clash of schedule for me, and I find myself in Ondo State where I was asked to represent the Vice President at the 10th anniversary of the Deji of Akure. So I'm in a native mode today. So I'm just, I'm not going to be presenting any paper, but I'll be speaking around the issues. I've been asked to speak about the performance of the 2025 budget and what's in it for businesses. So I'm going to rifle through that very quickly. Of course, we know the 2025 budget has been approved, even though the 2024 budget has also been rolled over. Maybe to ensure that some capital projects get completed or moved forward, coming from the last budget. Well, there's been, of course, complaints about the idea of rolling over budgets and so on, which is not the subject for today, but I believe that as the new administration takes footing properly, we would actually see an end to such practices as well. So the 2025 budget at about 54.9 trillion, about 55 trillion, so to speak, is large in Naira value, but in terms of dollar value, it could probably be at par with what we've had in previous years, maybe about 30 to 35 billion dollars. That's a concern. However, I quickly would want to say that I always point to the arbitrage that we enjoy as a result of the depreciation of the Naira, and it needs to be made very clear, the distinction between depreciation and devaluation. There was no decision taken by government to reduce the value of the Naira. However, when the Naira was floated, it sort of found its value at around where it is today. But you could see also that in the last few couple of weeks, we have been seeing an accretion to the value of the Naira, by which the Naira itself is gaining in the open market as well as in the official market. And one of the phenomena we have also seen in recent times is that the Naira sometimes in the parallel market or in the unofficial market sometimes sells, lower, rather stronger than the official market, which is a phenomenon. Well, I've been in banking off and on since 1992. Haven't seen that, I haven't seen that to date, so this is happening from time to time now, which actually, and of course, there's been also some reportage from some global media, Bloomberg, Reuters, and so on, to the effect that the Nigerian Naira seem to have decoupled from the price of oil, and that means that the market is taking hold. Anyhow, so back to the issue of the budget, about 55 trillion. I am actually an advocate of a larger budget. I heard a lot being said. Yes, of course, there's concern about how do we fund budgets. I'm going to get to that in a minute. But perhaps the thing that's worse than budgeting in a way that you may not be able to fund, or rather, making big budgets and not being able to fund it, the only thing that's worse than that is when you don't have any plans for your people. When you have a budget, the whole idea is at the end of the day, it's all about the people, what you want to do for the people. And of course, a budget is a dream, is a challenge that a government gives to itself to say, we can do better this year than we did last year. we need to provide more for our people this year than we did last year. And the same thing works for whether you were working for budgeting for a company or whatever. Every company budgets to do better in the new year. If you see a company that budgets to do worse, there must be perhaps a pandemic, a global issue that is affected. Even I've not seen that for most progressive companies. Every company would want to do better, and the same way is how a country is run. So I'm of the opinion that we need larger budgets. I'm hoping that 2026 budget will be even much larger. I think that we need to begin to, think and plan for the people and do big things for the people. We have a huge infrastructural, deficit, which needs to be financed and needs to be made. And when we talk about the 130 something million people in the multidimensional poverty, which came out a couple of years back, we need to know that multidimensional is actually non-income poverty, and it is only and solely all about infrastructure. So that actually informs the view of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu in investing in infrastructure at the national level, and also that the fact that a lot of money has been released to the state as a result of the reforms, and that the states are also concentrating on infrastructure building, which it will critically reduce the multidimensional. I think that if we redid that same report maybe early next year, we could have seen a scenario where the number could have dropped by a significant number, maybe 20, 30, 40 million taken out of multidimensional as a result of production of infrastructure. That said, there are changes in Nigerian economy. We know that the global oil prices, there was a bit of volatility, even though the Nigerian Brent crude and the Nigerian blends of crude oil seem to command a premium in the market of up to $5. So yes, however, the economy still seems tethered largely to the price of crude oil. However, the last time I checked Nigeria's import and export profile, anybody can do this, just Google Nigeria, Nigeria total export 2024, Nigeria total import 2024. Some things seem to have changed. On one hand is that we're exporting less and less of our crude oil, and I think that the target is zero, that we should be able to send all of those crude oil to our local, refineries so that we can use it to reboot the economy. The more we produce here, the better for us. And so we've seen a scenario where the exports have reduced of crude oil of about 50% as of 2024 December. And I think that this will ramp up even in the 2025 and going forward. Also, on the import side, Nigeria used to import about $25 billion in terms of refined petroleum. As of 2024, the total for that year was actually $10 billion. It's fantastic that we were able to walk away from $15 billion worth of petroleum imports in 2024. And if we do better with our local refining this year, of course, the target is also that we should import zero of crude oil, of refined petroleum and so on from abroad. So whereas we are concerned about the price of crude oil in the global market, but also I want to mention the fact that to help the budget is that we are seeing a scenario where there's less pressure on the naira. Perhaps the reason why the naira is also gaining a little bit. However, even where the naira is today at about 1,513 when I checked this morning officially, and also unofficially is about 1,000, around the same price. Where it's at, it has caused some behavioral to also discuss is that, like I said before, a new economy has emerged. When I look at the export profile of Nigeria for 2024, what I noticed was also that whereas our biggest export has always been crude oil, and it's still crude oil, even though that export dropped by about 50%. The second highest export was cocoa for 2024. And that number moved from about $800 million in 2023 to $2.6 billion in 2024, which is more than times 3, which is about more than, call it 400% or maybe over 200%, increase. So the economy is changing. Also, the fact that the creative economy is having more chunk, a larger chunk of the economy. Exporters seem to be doing pretty well. Producers of local apparels, people who are in the catering sector, some of the sectors are doing well. Look, what I always try to suggest is this. You see, there's all of us have what they call cognitive biases. And one thing I see that needs to be changed is the fact that we all have to begin to imagine a different economy, a new economy, and understand that the only constant thing in life is change. And the Nigerian economy is changing in spite of all of us. In spite of whatever, our biases are or what we think, this economy is changing. And I'm thinking that we should also open our eyes. And I mentioned the fact that our import and export profiles are changing somehow radically, and that, the Naira is going in different direction. In fact, the fact that the Naira is where it is today is that we're creating more demand for the Naira. Of course, there's the Naira for crude policy as well, creating more demand for the Naira. There's the Buy Nigeria policy that was enacted a few weeks ago, which is also creating more business for the Naira and creating business for Nigerians in Nigeria. So one of the things I'd always say, because you asked me what's the impact for the Nigerian businesses, is that the way you reposition yourself is what matters. Every policy has two sides, good and bad. It's not going to work for some people. It's going to work for some people. I mean, right now we have a scenario where crude oil marketers and, petroleum
Thank you so much. I think Dr. Tokwe had said so much, even though we would have loved that he completes his time, but I think his bandwidth, he confessed just before he began that he's out of Abuja, that is in Akure, that's Ondo State. On that note, I'd like us to thank Dr. Tokwe Fasua for the few minutes he's able to talk. Let's put hands together for Dr. Fasua. Thank you so much. So we need to move to what is next. Question.
I'm back now. I don't know, but I don't know what point I got off.
Dr. Tokwe, you're back.
Yes, I'm back.
I think you're trying to wrap up or something.
Yes,
please.
let me wrap up in 2 minutes. I don't know how much I got in the first place. So essentially to say that, look, I mean, I've been asked to speak about how what's the impact of Nigerian businesses. Of course, the budget, winners of a policy than there are losers of a policy, whether in Naira terms or in terms of numbers or in terms of businesses, so every policy has a good part and so on. So however, the policy about Buy Made in Nigeria is a plus and plus and plus for Nigerian businesses positioned to get the benefit. Remind the government of what it has promised. Remind the government of that policy. And it's not a policy that only talks about government businesses. Even the private sector is encouraged to patronize Nigeria rather than, and made in Nigerian products than anywhere else. You see that because of where the Naira is, maybe there's a little less of leisurely travel out of the country. People say they're going for summer. I think I'm rather pushing that people should come to Nigeria for summer. Summer here is better than summer in most other places and so on. So this is where we are right now. The reforms have taken hold. The Naira reforms where it is. The crude oil reform has repositioned the petroleum sector and ancillary businesses, oil servicing and all of that. It seems to be booming. Nigerians have moved into that sector. Renaissance taking over Shell, Seplat taking over Mobil and so on. And in fact, 50% of oil production in Nigeria today is being driven by the Nigerian businesses. And in fact, a lot more of that is going to happen. So I think we're seeing a plus. The last thing I probably want to say is number one, that our debt levels, I keep hearing about that, and I think it's a good time to address it. The point being that we're still running on a wrong GDP number of about 180 billion is wrong because it needed to have been updated almost 6 years ago. We've been waiting for MBS to bring out the new number. We're not going to preempt them, but the way I look at it, I mean, I can't go into that now, but at least this economy is about at least 350 billion to 400 billion. And if we have that kind of number, we realize that the debt we're complaining about is about 25% of GDP. And any country that's sitting on 25% of GDP is a country that doesn't have any plans for its people. So this country is sitting at the epoch of a positive explosion of value, of productivity, which I think that we must key into, essentially because of the critical and very important reforms that many other governments have run away from that Mr. President has taken on. Lastly, to say that, so we're waiting for that rebasing of the GDP, and it's going to change a lot of things, including, debt to GDP ratio, including per capita ratio. I think that I just want to say to everybody to stay positive. If you, let's be a bit less negative about our country because, hey, nobody's going to be positive about this economy but us. And, except we position to reap the benefits of this land, other people will come and reap the benefit of this land from us because essentially if we show that we don't know what to make of our own country, this is not about government, it's about each and every one of us. So I think that we'll be positive about the 2025 budget. It's going to be a mixed bag in terms of performance, but a few things that happen that will totally change the game and change the equation as we move along. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Tokwe. Please hold on. Dr. Tokwe Fasua. I'm told we have one or two questions for you. Are you there, Dr. Tokwe?
Yes, even though I need to run back into my event, I'll take a question, please.
Okay. Please, let's get the microphone to the first person. The lady, yes. Please give me, okay. Use this. Please shoot very fast. It needs to run. So we just take your only question.
Let me take two. Let's take two.
Okay, Dr. Tokwe, any other question? I'm told the question she has is for the previous speaker. So, okay, it appears there's no question for Dr. Tokwe Fasua. Dr. Tokwe, okay.
What I say needs to be ruminated upon before the questions come. In case the questions come later, they can be passed to me through the LCCI channel, and we can still address one way or the other.
Of course, we can. Just to say that, please extend our love and warmth to the Deji of Akure.
Yes, thank you so much.
Your royal father in Akure, Ondo State. Thank you so much, Dr. Tokwe.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Just email. So if in case you've not dropped your email, please do before you leave. That's one. Two, to also say that our website is also a platform you can interact with all the presentation here. Give us 1 or 2 hours after this event is over. You can go there to download all the presentations today, probably including the video of Dr. Tokwe Fasua's recording, so that thereafter, if you have your questions, please channel them to our official email. We'll get it across to them and revert. Once again, let's put hands together for Dr. Tokwe Fasua. On the program with you, we are supposed to have a goodwill message, but we are skipping that. We are actually running behind plans now. I'm also told that Dr. Adetilewa Adebajo also has taken an excuse not to be here now for an emergency, and there is no representative. So permit me also to move forward, just as Nigeria is moving forward. Thank you so much. Next for his presentation is Mr. Tola Adeyemi. Mr. Tola Adeyemi is the senior partner of the KPMG Nigeria and CEO KPMG West Africa. He will be talking to us on Nigeria economy scorecard, agriculture, manufacturing, and services. Let's put hands together for Mr. Tola Adeyemi. Is he in? Yes, let's put hands together for Mr. Because I'm looking for you. I said I've seen you once today. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Just correction. Tola is unavoidably absent. I'm Mohammed Adama, and I'll be taking the presentation on his behalf. Yes, he sends his apologies. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Mr. President, the leadership of LCCI. This permits me to stand on existing protocol. I'll be presenting on behalf of Tola Adeyemi, who sends his apologies. He's unavoidably absent. And we've been asked to speak on Nigeria's economic scorecard in 3 areas: agriculture, manufacturing, and services. So I'll start off with agriculture. I think from the previous sessions we had, there have been some data, some statistics about this sector already. But let me talk briefly about the performance of the sector over the past few years. If we look at the data, right, over the last 5 years, we've seen a decline in the agricultural sector in terms of, contribution to GDP, right? So as of 2024, it is a 19.5 trillion sector in terms of contribution to GDP, and that represents 24% of our GDP. But in terms of the growth, if you take a 5-year average, the growth rate is largely, we've seen a decline, and it's an average of 1.7%. This sector is largely dominated by crop production, followed by livestock. In fact, crop production is about 90% of this sector, and understandably so. So followed by livestock, which is about 5-6%, and then you have forestry, fishery in that order. So if we look at, how much was the contribution of this sector to our exports, right? In terms of exports contribution is about 3.3%. If you look at the average, again, over the last 5 years, we've seen a gradual increase. It's been flat largely, but we've seen an increase between 2022 and 2024. 2024, I'll speak to, the reasons behind the increase, the 5.7, because that's quite significant if you look at our trajectory over the last 5 years. What is really behind this, I think from the earlier speaker, we heard that the major, commodity, the major export commodity we have is cocoa. That's our number one in terms of non-oil exports. And talking about cocoa, between 2023 and 2024, the price of cocoa in the international markets actually tripled. From an average of $3,500 per metric ton, it went to as high as $12,000 per metric ton of cocoa beans. That's from 3,000 to 12. It has moderated a bit. It's now hovering around $9,000, but that's also almost 3 times what it used to be. So that's one of the reasons for the increase. Because some of our clients in this space, when you talk to them, you realize that their volume is flat. So the increase is not as a result of more volume, it's as a result of the price effect in the international market. And what drove the price up is really, production outputs. Because there was a decline in outputs, and that fueled speculative demand with respect to people trading in futures, in commodity futures. And that's what, fueled the price that we saw. So it's the impact of that price as well as the devaluation that happened. Because if you made $1,000, right, in early 2023, and you made the same $1,000 by December 2024, the value in Naira terms are materially different. So it's the price effects and the FX impact. That's what translates to the 5.7% in 2024 in terms of the performance. But if you compare to our African peers, right, you look at Ghana, Egypt, South Africa, you see Nigeria is at 3.3% on the average. We see where South Africa is, 10%, Egypt, 17%. So for us as a country, that's not where we should be, given our size, right? Given our population and given, what we are potentially capable of doing within this sector. Now, moving forward, so you then say, why are we here, right? Compared to our peers, right? Why are we here? Why are we where we are compared to our peers? And the reasons are not far-fetched. Insecurity, top on the list, right? We've seen, this is something we're all familiar with. Clearly, people have to go to the farms, and the insecurity issue is not even limited to only agriculture. It's a pervasive issue. So insecurity is part of the problem, limited access to farm inputs. Farmers don't have access to the sort of inputs that they need directly. And sometimes when government comes up with various interventions, sometimes they end up in the pockets of portfolio farmers, and that doesn't help much, right? Post-harvest losses is also another problem. The funding gap, low mechanization, and low irrigation systems. These are major areas. We need to be able to farm all year round to increase outputs, and we need to mechanize, to be able to get to the level where we can be able to compare with some of our peers like Egypt and South Africa. So here, what I've tried to do here is to look at the budgetary allocation to this sector. In 2003, the heads of African governments, right, they signed up to a declaration that each African government should allocate 10% of their budgets to agriculture. That was in Maputo, 2003. Although Nigeria signed up to this, we have never met this threshold. The closest we came was about 5.6%. I think in 2011 under the Jonathan government. Since then, their budgetary allocation to agriculture has declined, over time. We got to as low as 1% of the federal government budgets. However, in the last 2 years, the trend is reversing. In 2023, we saw an allocation of 1 trillion to the sector, and that has gone up to 2.27 trillion in 2024, representing 4.12% of the federal government budget. And so if you look at this compared to that Maputo declaration of 10%, you can really say we've been underinvesting in agriculture over time, right? And that's also part of, the indices. That's part of the reasons we've seen our performance compared to our peers. But it's a good thing that the trend is reversing, and we hope that the government will maintain, this trend going forward. Right, so the current government, there are certain policy initiatives and some strategic partnerships that they're embarking on that is expected to impact the sector positively. The policy environment is changing, and if we look at some of the things we have here, I've already spoken about the budgetary allocation, which is on an upward trend. There's the plan for dry season farming across several states of the Federation. There is also the partnership with John Deere, which is expected to deliver 2,000 tractors annually over the next 5 years. and also another partnership with Brazil. I think this is an offshoot of the president's visits to Brazil with respect to acquisition of modern agricultural machinery, from Brazil over the next couple of years as well. So these policy environments and some of these strategic partnerships are expected to impact the sector positively. However, given what the government is doing, which is in the right direction, there is still more work to be done. And I'll speak about some of them here. Top on the list is the security issue. This remains a monster that the government will need to tame, insecurity. Second to that is the issue of mechanization and irrigation system. For us to be able to really tap into agriculture and derive the sort of value that we expect, both in terms of being able to feed ourselves, being able to export and create jobs, we have to mechanize, and we have to be able to have efficient irrigation system that will allow us to, farm all year round. Access to funding, again, a problem for, the farmers. Many of these people don't have access to the sort of funding that they require. And this is happening in the face of rising input costs. When you talk about, improved seedlings, fertilizers, pesticides, and the like. Post-harvest losses management is another area that deserves attention. And of course, talking about improved seedlings, there are a number of areas, a number of crops that are yield, and in fact, several crops that our yield today are at below par, right? If you talk about rice, wheat, maize, the yield per hectare, across several crops is not where they are expected to be. And so some of these things, in terms of getting the right seedlings for our environments, we need to do the research ourselves. If I take an example of wheat, over 90% of our wheat consumption we import. Over 90% are imported, and it costs billions of dollars every year. And wheat, unfortunately, is not something that thrives very well in this environment. For you to develop the sort of varieties that will thrive in our climate, you need to do the research yourself. If we are looking to the West to do that research for us, it's not going to happen, because they are very happy for you to serve as a market, right? For them to produce. And trust me, if they were in our situation, they would solve it. They will sort it out. They are happy for us to be a market. So looking towards them to help us develop wheat variety that will thrive in this environment is not going to happen. So we need to do that ourselves, develop it, and it can be done if we are committed to it. Okay? So I move on to manufacturing. Manufacturing, again, I think the previous speaker also spoke about manufacturing. This is a 6.85 trillion GDP sector. The manufacturing sector, unfortunately, is also one of the sectors that have been underperforming over the years. If you see the contribution to GDP, it's only at 8.6%, and this is as of 2024. In terms of growth rate, we can see we've had a decline from 2018, right? It went down in 2019, and of course, when COVID happened in 2020, we took a further dip. It went negative. Then we had the post-COVID recovery that has, again, that seemed to be disappearing. It's been flat since then. So if you do an average, it's about 1.17%, growth rate for this sector. But if you compare the sector in terms of how we are faring in terms of exports, right? Yeah, if we compare the contribution of this sector to export, and you compare Nigeria to its peers, South Africa, we see South Africa is doing 39%, Egypt 46%, but Nigeria is doing 4.2%. right? And we can look at, if you look at the graph, we'll see the trend in terms of, the decline over time. So this is something, of course, I think the lowest over these last 5 years is 2023. And of course, the reason for that, 2023, we know that's when the current reforms started. So the impact of the FX, for those who are familiar with, happenings on the stock exchange, this is when most businesses reported massive exchange losses. Those of you who take dividends every year, I'm sure you had some disappointment in 2023 when some of some of the companies you invested in couldn't declare dividend because of exchange losses. So you see the impact of that in 2023. And this is this sector was most hit, I would say. You notice this is also the sector where some manufacturers, simply just exited the country, right? In that 2023, the likes of Procter & Gamble and the like. So, but good enough, things are turning around. The reforms by the government is taking shape, right? And there is some level of renewed confidence in the system. I think the worst is behind us in terms of, the economy and the macro. So we can only hope that things gets better from now. And in terms of the performance of the sector that I said is not at where it should be, what are the issues, right? I won't go into the details, but infrastructure deficits is a major problem. Multiple and high taxation, this is also a problem. Thankfully, the new tax acts, would help with this. That act has streamlined taxes. It is not only aimed at bringing more revenues for the governments, but it will also ease the compliance burden on businesses. And so that should help in this regard. The policy environment is also taking shape. High production costs, cost of energy, cost of diesel, still the dependence on diesel generators, by manufacturers is a big issue. Of course, insecurity and limited access to funding. What other things should the government be doing in terms of accelerating growth in the sector? Our access to long-term finance, right? This is a major problem. The banking system in Nigeria is very short-term. So if you're looking to finance major industrial projects, for instance, over a period of 10 years, it's difficult to raise the funding, from the Nigerian banks. That's the way they are structured. They just think very short term. And so this is a problem. So it is a failure of the market system. It's a failure on the part of the market. And this is where, you then need government to intervene. Usually if you have market failures, you then need an intervention from government. And this is one of the things that one of the areas the government can come in through the development finance institutions to recapitalize them and make sure they are able to fund long-term projects. You really cannot finance large-scale industrial projects with short-term funding. It's virtually impossible. That is a BTF. A business will be built to fail from the outset. And that's why some people who go into large-scale industrial production, what do? They end up taking foreign loans, right? And then the downside of that is you then have exposure to FX, right? Because that's something that you cannot really predict. Infrastructure development is another one. No matter what we do, what we say, no matter the policy that we design, you really cannot achieve true large-scale industrial production without power. It's impossible. It will not happen. If you don't fix electricity, you can't achieve large-scale industrial production. The good thing is, it's one of the areas of focus for this government. The various mini-grid projects, that are ongoing, those are moves in the right direction, but they need to be accelerated and we need to scale, right?
ease of doing business, that's something that the fiscal and tax policy reforms are doing, but there are other aspects that needs to be looked at. Our ports needs to be more efficient. You really cannot have a situation where our seaports are one of the most expensive in the world. That is not a statistic we should be proud of, that our ports are in the top 5 most expensive ports in the world, and that's a fact. And you'd have a situation where, you know, even cargo planes come to Nigeria and they have to fly empty to neighboring country, Ghana, right, to go and load. That shouldn't happen. You know, that are also things, areas of quick wins that the government will need to take a look at. And not just to make us competitive, but to also help our own exporters. You need to make it easy for people to be able to export and to import. SMEs, the SMEs are a major part of the economy. They play a very important role in the economy. If you look at most manufacturers in Nigeria, the SMEs is their backbone in terms of distribution, logistics, you know, and all of that. These the SMEs that they ride on the back of the SMEs to get their products to the consumers. And so the support for the SMEs is paramount in terms of, you know, supporting them with single-digit, loans that are affordable, you know, to this sector, and various other supports, you know, that can strengthen our SMEs. This is very, very vital. Okay. The other thing, of course, the issue of security, that cannot be overemphasized. Policy consistency. One of the problems we've had over the years is policy inconsistency, essentially driven by changes in government, right? We're seeing reforms now moving in the right direction, right? Even though, yes, it has not started really trickling down to the man on the streets, right? Businesses are beginning to see it, but if you ask the man on the streets, the man on the street is yet to feel it. It will take time, but it will come. We expect the government, and we hope the government will continue with the reforms, and also hope that they don't press the pause button for 2027 election, because that's also important. They should just continue in spite of the elections if we must get the real benefit from these reforms. Okay? The services sector. So if we look at the services sector in terms of, you know, contribution to GDP is 45.1 trillion, and this is the biggest contributor to our GDP as a country. Is services. Is over 50%, and it's been over 50% for the past 5 years, right? Services. And so, and it's dominated by ICT, trade, the financial services sector, and real estate. Those are the dominant sectors. And if you, in terms of growth, however, it is also the fastest growing. The components that are growing the fastest are also within the services sector. As a subsector, the growth rate, the 5-year average is 3.78%. So contribution to export, again, if we look at this is not where we should be. And compared to, again, our peers, Egypt, Ghana, South Africa, Nigeria is at 7.9%, about the same level as Algeria. But again, if you compare to the people you call the giant economies in Africa, which is South Africa and Egypt, we should be doing much, much better than this. The challenges of the sector, again, weak systems and unreliable power supply, policy uncertainty and implementation, access to affordable funding, all the challenges mentioned that are relevant to the other sectors are also quite relevant here. I have only 15 minutes, so I'll quickly round up. In terms of what, you know, we need to be looking at, if you look at the outlook for this sector, population growth is one of the things that, you know, really supports the growth of this sector. If you look at our population and the rate at which you are growing, there will be need for more services, be it financial services, education services, health services, real estate, there will be more demand. The internet penetration, which is very high, we have a population that is relatively young, right? You have young people that are tech savvy, and so the demand for tech services is also expected to grow. You have innovative startups that are doing great things in various sectors. We looked, for those of us who were in Lagos last December, when Dirty December happened, we saw what happened to, the short-let accommodation, how everywhere was almost fully booked. And people are bringing creativity, right, into that space. And so that is expected to continue if we continue with the current, reform. For this sector really is doing well, but there's still a few things that the government will need to look at. Infrastructure development, the support for the sector, emerging sectors needs to be identified properly. If you look at some of the emerging subsectors, the wellness, remote work, content creation, these are emerging sectors within the subsector that the government really need to look at how you capture the activities within this sector and report them properly. My closing thoughts. So some of us may be familiar with this data, 400 million people by 2050. That is the projection, right, by the World Bank and IMF, that Nigeria as a country will be 400 million people by 2050. 2050 is only 25 years away, right? And if you're going to have 400 million people, you need to be able to plan for how to feed them, right? Because right now, we can't beat our chest and say we are feeding ourselves because we're struggling. We import a lot of food. So if you're going to have 400 million people, you need to start planning for how to feed them. You need to plan for how to accommodate them, housing, and you need to plan for the infrastructure. Where are the schools? Where are the hospitals? Where are the roads? The time to start planning is now. For the businesses, you have to be able to position yourself to take advantage, full advantage of that large population. The population is there. As a business, you need to think, how do I position myself to make sure I meet the increasing demand? Whether you are playing in the agriculture space, you're playing in the services space, or in the manufacturing space, the demand is going to continue to increase because of our increasing population. And the planning in terms of what government needs to be doing, especially in terms of feeding, if you think about the fact that the land size that we have, our land space is fixed. So it's the same land size that we have today. If it's 2 million hectares, it's the same 2 million hectares that you're going to have when you have a population of 400 million people. The land size is not going to increase. And so you then have to ask yourself, how do you then produce the most from the arable land that you have? To do that, you need to increase the yield across almost all crop types. You need to be able to farm all year round, and you need to scale production and support services across all sectors. We are not a country that can say we are the best planners, but it's never too late. The time to start is now. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Well represented. You represented Mr. Tola Adeyemi so well. I'm sure he'll be very proud of you anywhere he is watching us now. Thank you so much, sir. We'd like to have a quick one. We are actually not doing well with our time now, so we need to be very firm with time. Ms. Oreoluwa Odetunde, Head Research and at Asset Management, we have her to speak on financial market outlook, opportunities and portfolio mix and yield outlook. Put your hands together for Ms. Oreoluwa Odetunde for 15 minutes. Let's clap for her now, a female. Ah, thank you. Thank you, man. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you for that warm reception as well. So today I'll be speaking to us about the financial market outlook for the second half of the year, touching on the stock market as well as the fixed income market as well. Next slide. Okay, so we decided to start off with a half-year market performance snapshot for the first half of 2025, and we compared that to where we were H1 2024, sorry. So we highlighted most of, the assets investors tend to invest in, and try to look at the relative performance on a year-on-year basis. So we started off the year with a lot of optimism, especially post the US election. We had started to see that investors were pricing in lower interest rates in 2025. Also, inflation was also expected to make its way down. I mean, global inflation was around 6-7% in 2024. I think the forecast for IMF was that figure was supposed to drop to around 3-4% in 2025. So investors have started to expect a relatively stable investment environment in 2025. And, investors also started to price in the fact that we started to see, US exceptionalism. So what that just means is that, investors were expecting that, US stocks, US bonds, as well as dollars, they were expected to continue to outperform the rest of the world. But, following the announcement by the Trump administration about his trade tariffs, we started to see that investor sentiment changed towards the financial markets. So we started to see an exit of investors from the US markets. They started to look overseas into foreign markets. And that's why you'll see from the chart here that, the US stock markets actually just delivered a return of about 6.4% in the first half of the year. But when you compare that to where international stocks were, you would see that, it was still relatively lower. So in terms of international stocks market performance, we saw a performance of around 17%. That dwarfed the US market performance of 6.43%. And also the dollar as well. We saw that the dollar also started to make its way down. So, okay, no, we're still on that slide. I still wanted to. Okay. Okay, so for the dollar, we started, like I said, investors were starting to make their way out of the US market, and that was what led to the depreciation of the dollar that we saw. And we know technically, most times when we see financial stress happen, what tends to happen is that, the US dollar is a safe haven asset. So investors start to buy some of these assets. But what we realized was that investors were dumping stocks, they were dumping bonds, and they were also dumping the dollar. They were going for things like gold. We saw significant increase in gold. Gold increased by about 28%. In the last 2 years, we've seen that gold has increased by over 50%. We've also seen Bitcoin as well also increase by over 53%. In the first half of the year. And this is also due to the support that Bitcoin is getting from the US from the Trump administration. Okay, so this chart shows us how global investors were piling into the European and emerging market funds in from 2022 to 2025. So you would see that, in terms of the fund allocations towards the US market, that tends to be quite volatile. But since June 2024, we've started to see that there's been increased allocation towards the European equity funds. There've also been increased allocations towards emerging market and developing economy ETFs as well. So it just goes to corroborate our story that investors are looking away from the US market and they're looking to invest outside of the US market. The other chart also shows the price to earnings ratio of the US stock market, and it compares that to the frontier market as well as the European stock market. And we still continue to see that on a valuation basis, the US stock market is still doing way higher. It dwarfs the valuation for most of Europe as well as emerging and frontier markets. So it just goes to also show us that in terms of valuation, the valuation for the frontier market and the emerging markets is still very attractive. So the African equities market was also not left out of the fund allocation and the positive sentiment from investors. So you would see from the chart that, in terms of local currency return for the Ghana stock market, the market returned by about 40%, but in terms of its USD return, that was significantly higher at about 80%. And this was due to the fact that we've seen a significant rally in gold, like I earlier mentioned. Also, we are seeing significant economic reforms in Ghana as well. And we also saw that the country was able to restructure some of its debt. Remember, in 2023, the country had to restructure around $13 billion of its debt. And now we've seen that debt to GDP of the country has made its way down to about 55%. It was typically around 80% in 2023. So there's been a lot of economic reforms going on in Ghana, and that's why foreign investors were, very interested in that market. I think for Nigeria, due to the relative stability that we've seen in the FX environment, we didn't necessarily see a significant move in the USD return. But in terms of the local currency return, it was still a bit decent. The return was around about 16.6% in the first half of the year. And when we now looked at the price to earnings ratio also for select African countries and compare them to where Nigeria is, you'll still see that Nigeria is trading at a significant discount to most of these other African economies, I think with the exception of Ghana. And this is due to the fact that we are seeing higher earnings per share growth in the market. For South Africa, we still continue to see a bit of overvaluation going on there. We still expect to see a bit of sell-offs due to some of the economic woes in the country. So when we also looked at the Nigerian market activities in the first half of the year, we saw that the NGX, like I earlier mentioned, increased by about 16.6% in the first half. And, it was a significant drop from the 35.5% return that we saw in H1 2024. And this was because I believe that, this return that we've seen this year is a lot more broad-based than the returns that we saw in H1 2024, because what really drove the market's performance in H1 2024 was really the buying pressures that we saw in Dangote Cement that increased by over 70%, and that made the market increase by about 35%. In H1 2024. But this year, we realized that the gains are a lot more broad-based. They are concentrated in sectors like the consumer goods sector. Also, the banking sector has seen some interest from investors, especially foreign portfolio investors, and as well as, the telecoms sector. For the consumer goods sector, I think what majorly led to the rally that we saw was very impressive earnings releases from most of the corporates in this sector. And, we recall that in 2023 and 2024, most of the companies listed on this in this sector, they suffered significant FX losses, as well as, very significant inflationary pressures. But what we started to see was that there was a bit of recovery in their first quarter earnings. And we didn't just see that it was price adjustments that, increased the earnings of these companies. It was also some form of volume recovery that also supported their revenue growth as well. For the banking sector, we are aware of the ongoing recapitalization exercise, and we still expect that will continue to drive market activities in the second half of the year. So all in all, we still continue to think that Nigeria trades at a cheap valuation compared to other African sovereigns. So when we also looked at the outlook of the market on the foreign side and on the domestic side, we still expect to, despite the fact that, we're seeing that outflow from the US market, we still think that, earnings should remain resilient in the US market. We are necessarily following the money. And when we mean following the money, is the investments we continue to see in AI, is the investment we continue to see in aerospace as well as defense. We see that stocks related to these industries are doing particularly well. And we think that that will continue to support their stock price movements. We also have noticed that we haven't necessarily seen a weakness in the hard data releases that we've been seeing from the Fed. In terms of, inflation data, in terms of GDP data, we haven't yet seen a significant weakness. But, in terms of soft data, when we look at things like consumer surveys, when we look at things like, their, price sales and stuff like that, we started to see that there's some weakness in consumer surveys, in soft data, so to say. But in terms of hard data, we still continue to see that we have not seen that weakness yet. And that's why we continue to expect that equity should outperform in the second half of the year. For the fixed income market, we still think that a major risk in the fixed income market is the high budget deficits we continue to see from advanced economies. For the US, for instance, we see that debt is above 36 trillion, and it continues to raise its debt ceiling in order to accommodate more debt. But that is giving investors some concern around treasury yields, especially at the long end of the curve. So we do expect that that would be some risk for fixed income in the second half of the year. For our domestic market, we still think that the banking sector recapitalization should continue to support market activities. We know that I think the recapitalization exercise is expected to end in the first quarter 2026. So we still expect to see some banks continue to raise capital, and I expect that that will drive some attraction towards the equity market. We've seen recently that GTCO was able to list on the London Stock Exchange, and that attraction it has brought towards the banking sector recently. Also, we expect continuous FX stability. We do think that some of the reforms that the federal government has deployed will continue to support FX stability in the domestic market. Also, we still expect that earnings growth to still remain strong, especially in the banking sector as well as telecommunication sector. We still expect to see very strong earnings also from the consumer goods sector due to things like volume recovery as well as a reduction in cost pressures. And we also know that some corporates were able to restructure their balance sheets in 2024. So that's definitely been able to help them declare higher earnings in 2025. For our fixed income market, we also still expect that yields will continue to make their way down in 2025. We've seen recently treasury bill yields and bond yields have started to decline, and this is due to the fact that the central bank as well as debt management office have cut their debt issuances. So due to the fact that there's less supply in the market and so much liquidity, we expect that that liquidity will be chasing the debt issuances in the market, which would start to influence a downward trend in yields. Like I said, we still expect higher system liquidity in the second half of the year. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's put the hands together once again for Oreoluwa. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you. I like to reiterate, I'd said that before, that all the slides, the presentations, because you discover because of our time, most of our guest speakers are trying to rush over some of those thoughts. But I assure you, you will have all the slides in your email. I also promise an hour or two after this event is over, you can be sure to have the slides uploaded on our website for your free download. For the last thought for today, we have, I believe, Taiwo Oyedele has made the job of Mr. Olaleye Adebiyi, the Regional Managing Director, Partner Anderson, Nigeria, easy or much easier with what he's going to be talking about. Tax reforms in Nigeria, implication for business going forward. Let's put hands together for Mr. Olaleye Adebiyi for his session of 15 minutes. Put your hands together for Mr. Olaleye, please. We are not clapping for Olaleye again, please. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone, and good afternoon to the president of the LCCI and other executives. Just a point of correction. I know that for those of us who have seen the program flyer, and if you're familiar with Mr. Olale Adebi, I'm sure you'll be wondering whether he has suddenly become younger. My name is Chiwendo Enechi, and I'm here to represent Mr. Adebi, who is unavoidably absent. And he sent his apologies. Today, I'll be speaking on tax reforms in Nigeria, implications for business going forward. And I think just like the MC said, one of the toughest things about speaking last in an event like this is that you run the risk of losing people because they've been sitting for so long. But I must also appreciate the wisdom of whoever put the program together and put this presentation last, because like the MC said, Mr. Taiwo has just made my job so much easier. Going after him, a lot of the things that I'll be saying are things that he's already mentioned. It's just a case of repeating some of those things and putting some context to it. So I'm hoping that this will work. Okay, so my presentation is essentially going to cover this. Look at the overview of the tax reforms. Of course, touch on some of the changes. There's so many changes, but I'll just touch on some of them. I think Taiwo also touched on a lot of the changes. And then, of course, we look at the implications for business going forward. High-level implications, really, in terms of how does this affect businesses, not essentially from what you are required to do from a compliance perspective, but how does the reform itself affect businesses? And of course, look at some recommendations and then conclude. So overview, what I have here is just a snapshot of information with respect to the bill. Like we all know, the president signed 4 transformative bills into law on the 26th of June, which is just a few weeks ago, essentially changing the Nigerian tax space. Obviously, that bill, the VAT still remains 7.5%, and CIT remains at 30%. But I think before we proceed, I think it's important to kind of take our mind back to why the reform, looking at where we're coming from. Over the years, our tax to GDP ratio, I think Mr. Taiwo also mentioned it, historically had lagged behind. For a very long time, we hovered around 6 to 10%. And for some of us who understand what that means, tax to GDP ratio essentially just measures how much of a country's economic activity is collected as tax and assesses the strength of a country's tax system and your ability to fund public services and infrastructure. And when you look at a rate of 6 to 10%, I'm sure you will agree with me that that's quite low, particularly given our economic context and where we are and the issues with public debt and all that. So it kind of tells you why these reforms now are very critical, and they are coming at a very critical moment. Now, there are 4 pillars to the reform. One is the Nigerian Tax Act, which is kind of a comprehensive tax law that consolidates all the taxes that we have, most of the taxes, if I may say so. And then you have the Nigerian Tax Administration Act that has streamlined tax administrative framework. And then we have the Nigerian Revenue Services Act, which kind of introduced a modern revenue collection and restructures the FIRA, the Federal Inland Revenue Service as we know it today, into Nigerian Revenue Service. And then, of course, you have the Joint Revenue Board Nigerian Act, harmonized dispute resolution. I think that's the one that also introduced the tax on board. So it harmonizes dispute resolution arising from revenue administration. And the proposed implementation date is January 1st, 2026. Now, the strategic objective of these reforms is essentially to reduce the number of taxes that we have. Yeah, I'm sure many of us are very familiar with, receiving levies, different taxes from different authorities, and sometimes you're wondering, are we taxing the same revenue multiple times? So what this reform, seeks to achieve is to streamline that and reduce that number to a manageable single digit. And of course, enhance revenue generation. I know when Taiwo was talking, he said that the objective isn't necessarily to increase revenue. While I agree with that, because when you do all the other things that you're supposed to do from a policy standpoint, the revenue will automatically increase. So yes, while that may not be the objective, the first thing, but at the end of the day, the reform is also expected to enhance revenue generation, but not by increasing tax rate, but simplifying how compliance is done to also help, which will help the tax authorities increase revenue and of course address the regional disparity in terms of tax administration. So that's just the overview. And looking at the key changes, I say for the sake of time, I'm just focusing on just a few of those changes because there's so many of the changes, but these are the ones I felt like we should speak on. One is capital gains tax. As we currently know it, is 10%, but what has happened now, the rate is going to increase to 30%. And what this has done is it kind of equates it to the rate of companies' income tax, and is sort of closes the gap, the opportunity for tax arbitrage between capital gains and trading income. We also have the introduction of the VAT fiscalization and e-invoicing. I'm sure a lot of us have seen so many there's a recent publication from the FRS, I think a week or two ago, with respect to implementation deadline. Now the new tax act kind of mandates businesses to implement e-invoicing, of course, using systems that are approved by the FRS, to kind of transition us to adopt global best practice in terms of VAT administration. And of course, we have the effective minimum tax rate, which for me is also quite important. And it speaks to the point that Taiwo made in terms of base erosion and profit shifting. So what you then have is a situation where you have like a top-up tax, where your tax rate seems to be below 15% of net income. The expectation is that for those companies who will be affected, that you will pay a top-up tax to bring that rate back to, at the very least, 15%. And then, of course, you have economic development incentive. I think there was a gentleman who asked a question when Taiwo spoke. This essentially replaces the pioneer status incentive that we currently have. And the objective is to, what the scheme seeks to do is to provide targeted incentive to some priority sectors. And the whole idea is to increase capital investment in those areas, which will accelerate industrial growth. And then you have R&D deduction in an attempt to kind of boost innovation, kind of encourage local production. What the law has done is to then introduce that to allow companies to take a deduction for whatever cost that they spend with respect to research and development, but that's pegged to 5% of the turnover of that company. But I think it's a welcome development, really, because currently when you deal with tax authorities, you have that issue of how do I treat R&D cost and how much of it can I deduct? But what this reform has done is to introduce that, to give companies the ability to take that deduction, of course, pegging it at 5% of turnover. So these are some of the changes that that I've decided to put here for the sake of time. Like I said, there's so many changes, so many, and I think good enough Mr. Taiwo touched on some of those changes. Now, but the question then is, how does it then impact, businesses? What are the implications? There's some implications that I thought would be nice to share. One is enhanced taxpayer services. And the reason I say so is that the Act has kind of introduced some provisions that provide some support to taxpayers, one of which is better dispute resolution. I'm sure many of us would have experienced a situation where maybe you have an employee, for those of us who do tax and have to advise client, you have employees in, let's say, Ogun State, and they work in Lagos State. And then you then go ahead, you pay taxes to Lagos State. Ogun State then comes to say, you're owing me taxes. And then you say, well, I've paid to Lagos State. Ogun State say, well, I don't really care. You figure out you are owing me this and you have to pay. We've seen clients who are in that position and you're wondering, what do I do? You go to Lagos State. Lagos State, of course, when money goes into government coffers, it's difficult to come out. So with this dispute resolution, you then have a system that can mediate on those kind of issues. And of course, you have clearer communication with the tax authorities, particularly with respect to digitization. Now you can submit responses to tax authorities via your email, and I think that's quite helpful. And also reduction in compliance uncertainty. I think to a large extent, the reforms have kind of brought some reduction to that, where you know exactly what you need to do, and in some instances where some things may not be clear. The expectation is that you receive some clear feedback from tax authorities. So for me, I think that is what it seeks to achieve. The other thing is input VAT recovery. I think this is significant, and it has impact on cash flows. What this does is the law has then kind of allowed companies to claim input VAT on all purchases. Currently, that's not what we have, but in the new law, you can claim input VAT on all purchases, including services and fixed asset, to the extent that those input VAT are directly related to suppliers that you also charge VAT on, because that's how input output mechanism works. They have to be activities that you're also going to charge input VAT on. And then of course you have compliance system upgrade. There is increased compliance requirement. Obviously, the implication to businesses that you have to upgrade your system. It is no longer a business as usual. We won't continue to do things like we used to. So there has to be some system upgrade. You have to look at your tax, procedure. You have to make some changes. You're going to have to train your people to be able to meet the demands of the compliance requirements. So you also have increased penalty for non-compliance. And what that does is that businesses will begin to prioritize compliance because there are huge penalties. So you're going to have to respond quickly to those things. The other issue is also on digital economy integration. Of course, this creates opportunities for real-time tax monitoring and compliance. And so those who are able to latch on to that will sort of have a competitive edge because you're able to increase your response to your compliance requirements. Just running fast so I can finish on time. Now, it's interesting that Mr. Mohammed also touched on, manufacturing and agriculture and also service industry. Looking at sector-specific implication, one of the things that I thought was quite significant is zero rating of essential manufacturing input. And what this does is kind of reduces the input cost for manufacturing companies. And the whole idea is to increase, we're beginning to see uptick in that space. And the entire reform, we have that impact to continue to increase that uptick. And of course, it creates opportunities for vertical integration and allows these companies to manage their supply chain and optimize that. When you look at agriculture, it also continues to enjoy some incentive. Again, similar to the manufacturing, you have the law has kind of expanded the zero rating for essential food items, which for me is quite, transformative because it helps companies that are into food processing And what that does is kind of reduces their input costs because the food items, the basic food items are what they use, to process. So that input cost will reduce, and of course, some impact on their cash flow. They can then invest that excess cash into the business. Of course, the service sector is not left out. I think Mohammed talked about the digital economy provision that kind of create opportunity for technology-driven services. And I think it will be funny to finish this whole presentation without talking about how the reform also affects me as a consultant. It creates opportunity for us as consultants to offer consulting services in terms of tax compliance and, of course, digital transformation. So these are some of the impacts that I've seen. But what should you then do? And how should you respond to these reforms and the impact that I've just put here? One of the things I think you need to do is there has to be education. So management needs to be aware of the changes to the law. For you to respond to something, you need to know what that is. So management needs to be aware. Companies need to conduct what I call comprehensive impact assessment. To say, okay, this is what we currently do. How do we move from where we are to the new regime? How does that impact commercial arrangement, like maybe proposed divestment or acquisition that a company wants to do? How does that impact your current operating structure? For companies who are in a group, for instance, this is a very good time to look at how that group is structured, particularly when it comes to related party transactions. You need to engage qualified tax professionals to guide you through this. I mean, we can't overemphasize that. Speaking to people who understand that, you need to understand your obligation under the new law. The other thing is also the implementation framework, which should address things like system upgrade. I already talked about the requirement for, what's it called? VAT fiscalization and e-invoicing. So that will impact on your current system. So there has to be that system upgrade. There needs to also be compliance process modification. Of course, the framework cannot not touch on, addressing your stakeholders, which is your employees, your customers, your vendors. I know that for a lot of companies, of course, you onboard vendors. So you do vendor registration. We're in a stricter penalty regime now under the new law. And there's a penalty for awarding contracts to companies that are not registered for taxes. So this is where conversations with customers and potential vendors will need to happen. You need your vendors to understand what their own obligations are under the law while working with you, because that could impact the relationship. So it's very important. And of course, you build sustainable tax capabilities, which includes training your people. So these are things you need to do. Train your people, build a very strong internal tax capability so that you can have a seamless transition to the new tax regime. And in closing, I'll just say that, look, we're in a new era and we have to embrace it. We can't run away from it. We have to embrace it. The reforms offers like a mix of incentives and obligation, increase the compliance requirements. But I would think that those who are better equipped to respond to it will respond better. And so you have to just go ahead and, get acquainted with the new law, speak to those who know what needs to be done, and educate yourself a lot better. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Wow. I think I should confess that it's been a very long day for us here at the chamber today. Can I ask any question? I know. Wow. For him, right? Because as you will observe, most of our guest speakers had to leave immediately after their presentation because of one other engagement or the other. So, sir, your question is directed at him, right? Okay. Let me give you the opportunity as we ask the Director of Research and Advocacy here at SCCI, Dr. Sonny Omezia, be getting ready for the closing thought.
Thank you. My name is Abdurazak Oluwashonraji. I'm into renewable energy. So I wanted to ask the questions in regards to essential items that are exempt from VAT. The bill says essential items such as food, education, healthcare will be zero VAT, while rent, public transportation, renewable energy will be exempt, providing relief for low-income houses that spend 100% of their income on essential items. My main point is I just wanted to confirm whether renewable energy products are VAT exempt.
Thank you so much. So your question is whether renewable energy products are VAT exempt. So the answer is yes. And when you say product, I think there's also context to it because you need to define what you're providing. There's product, there's a service, which can also fall under renewable. So, but to answer your question in terms of the traditional renewable energy product, the idea is that they will be exempt under the new law.
Thank you so much. With that, we'd like to call it a wrap. While I'm waiting for, is Dr. Sonny in now? Okay. Maybe I should just do this on his behalf. We'd like to, on behalf of the president and chairman of council of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, we'd like to thank you again for coming for this all-important media economic review and outlook conference powered by your chamber. We believe all the thoughts shared here today will be useful for us as we engage going forward in the year 2025. I also like to mention that, again, for the last time, that all the presentations will be sent to your email addresses. In case you do not have that, about 2 hours after this event is over, please check up on our website, lagoschamber.com, for a free download. Please, can we be upstanding as we take the national anthem for a closing today?
Though tribe and tongue may differ, in brotherhood we stand. Nigerians old and proud to serve our sovereign fatherland.
Thank you so much. Do have a nice day. Please keep your personal belongings, your iPad, your everything. Thank you.